Qinmu was stunned and didn't know who this Dao friend was. However, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor disclosing his worry to him made his hair stood on end. He felt he could be gotten rid of any time, silencing him. You don't have to worry. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor seemed to be able to see what he was thinking and said leisurely, I only felt some emotions in my heart and shared them with you. You're a good listener. If it was Duke Wei that blabbermouth, I wouldn't dare to say much. Otherwise the entire Imperial Court will know about it the next day. Duke Wei? Wei Yong seems to be from Duke Wei's family. Qinmu blinked his eyes innocently. Duke Wei, a first-ranking high official, was also a blabbermouth? Wei Yong's talkativeness was already much of a headache, so he had actually learned it from his family. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said. Furthermore, even though you're a 6th-ranking Imperial Academician and have an official position, you are not part of the Imperial Court. It's very safe talking with you. He gave a smile and said, the most crucial point is that no one would believe what the Devil Cult Master of Heavenly Devil Cult says. Qinmu's face darkened. Even though Heaven Devil Cult had a good reputation with the commoners, in the eyes of the Imperial Court and martial world, they had a bad reputation. Those few generals came closer to them and one of them bowed. Imperial Preceptor, Heaven Wave City has already been quelled. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor nodded his head and the few generals looked at Qinmu, giving off puzzled expressions. Qinmu smiled and nodded to them. This is the first Imperial Academician of our dynasty. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said. Imperial Academician Qinmu. These few generals saw Qinmu appearing honest and magnificent. Even though he was young, he gave people a feeling of reliability. They couldn't help exclaiming, Academician Qin is truly young yet matured, as expected of the first Imperial Academician, a person that's erudite. Qinmu greeted and smiled. You have flattered me. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor turned around and looked towards the south. This battle is only giving them an inkling of what we're capable of. The battle afterward is then the crucial one, Kiki. The few generals felt astonishment in their hearts and they immediately rushed forward. Imperial Preceptor, your injury. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor waved his hands and his face was slightly pale. He then recovered and said, I might have suffered the recoil when killing that devil god just now, it's nothing serious. The rebel army is stationed in the south and I prepare to give them 2 choices. Pillar of State he. A general with a square face bowed. Yes, Imperial Preceptor. Go to the south and tell the rebels there that I'm coming. I'm giving them 2 choices. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor pointed to the southern borders with a cold expression. The first choice, I will lead thousands of soldiers and cavalries over and trample all over them, eradicating their cults, eradicating their sects, eradicating their whole families. This is the rules of the Imperial Court. This is what will happen to the rebels. Pillar of State General He Xiaoping listened carefully and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor continued. The second choice is to follow the rules of the martial world. I'll bring the officials of the Imperial Court over to mark out an area and they would all go there to challenge us accordingly to the rules of the martial world. If they have the ability they can kill us or we will kill them. 2 choices for them to choose. Pillar of State he hesitated and said, Imperial Preceptor, I'm afraid it's a little appropriate to go according to the rules of the martial world, right? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, Before I entered the Imperial Court as an official, I was also someone from the martial world, so why is it inappropriate? Isn't it the same for Pillar of State General? You have also entered the Imperial Court from the martial world, am I right? Pillar of State he affirmed and said, I'll head to the southern border right now. However, now that Imperial Preceptor is recuperating, if they choose to go by the rules of the martial world, I'm afraid Imperial Preceptor will get stabbed in the back. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor waved his hand and Pillar of State he left. Pillar of State Wei. Yes, Imperial Preceptor. Dispatch the soldiers and cavalries to cross the river, spreading into the shape of a fan. The east side will move all the way to the East Sea. The west side will move all the way to Great Ruins. Pushing forward horizontally, we'll suppress lakes as we cross lakes, suppress rivers as we cross rivers, eradicate cities when we cross cities, push forward to the south. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said expressionlessly, We need to let these rebels feel the pressure. Wei Wenju receives Imperial Preceptor's command. Duke Wei. Yes, Imperial Preceptor. Duke is powerful in cultivation and proficient in leading troops. You'll lead the troops straight towards Daxiang of the southern borders. Grand General of Crowning the Army, Grand General of Cherishing Transformation. Each of you will lead an army and head off from both sides of the Duke to eradicate the left and right city of Daxiang. Pillar of State Shang. You will lead an army and slaughter towards Dayu. After Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor dispatched his army and was finished with his instructions, Duke Wei smiled. Imperial Preceptor, now that we have all gone to work, what about you? Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor gave a smile. I slowly walk behind you guys and wait for the rebels to make their decision. Furthermore, I still have some injuries on me and need to recuperate. Your injury isn't healed yet? Duke Wei said in a loud voice. Then you need to rest for a period of time. Isn't the little divine physician beside you? Let him treat you. My wife even ran to Flower Alley of the capital city behind my back. I thought she liked women and went the brothels there for fun, and it ended up she was there to find the little divine physician for a cure. She scared the hell out of me and even made me a little excited. I thought she was into this kind of stuff. Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor coughed dryly and was a little awkward. It's time for Duke to dispatch your troops. Daxiang is an important ground of the southern borders army. It's a tough bone to chew. Duke Wei nodded his head and turned around to leave. He then turned his head back and said to Qin Mu, Little divine physician, give him a prescription to treat that rigid face of his. This long face can't even squeeze out a smile. Don't look around, I recognized you. When my wife went to your place for a cure, I had secretly followed her. I was afraid she was sleeping with other women, and was even a little excited. Qin Mu's expression froze as he waved back at him. Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor let out a murky breath and said, Ignore him, the men of Wei family are all like this. Their mouths are so big that they could swallow a few cows. Qin Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was obvious Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor had also his own taste of suffering. Duke Wei must have talked a lot of nonsense in front of him. Imperial Preceptor, we'll part our ways here. Qin Mu smiled. Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor shook his head. Part our ways, what for? You are still going to follow me to the southern borders. Without you by my side, how are you going to cure me? Qin Mu said awkwardly. Stop fooling around, Imperial Preceptor. You know better than me regarding the injuries on your body. Furthermore, I had brought scholars out for experience, but now I have lost these few scholars, so I would have to find them in case they die in this chaos. You must follow me. Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor's face clouded and said, I'll help you find those scholars of yours. What are their names? Qin Mu really didn't want to follow him. Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor was obviously making all the armies put an immense pressure to the rebels of the southern borders, forcing the sects and families to have no choice but to come kill Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor under the pressure. Imperial Preceptor seemed to give them two choices, but there was actually only one choice. If he followed Imperial Preceptor, he would definitely become a target as well. He was only at 5 Elements realm. How could he be an opponent for this kind of Leviathan? However, now that Imperial Preceptor had given his words, he was unable to reject and could only say the names of Chan Wanyun and the rest. Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor raised his hand and a fire cloud soared into the sky. The fire cloud transformed in the sky and formed the names of Chan Wanyun, Yu Qinghong, Yun Ke and Si Yunxiang. Another fire cloud then turned into an arrow that pointed towards Qin Mu's location. Not long later, Chan Wanyun, Si Yunxiang and the rest hurried over. They all had injuries on their bodies. It was obvious that they had also experienced hard battles as well and escaped death. The dragon Qilin was also beside them and carried over by the wolf slave. Scholars of Imperial College meet Imperial Preceptor. Chan Wanyun and the rest jumped in shock when they saw Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor, and immediately greeted. The few of them felt uneasy as Qin Mu had summoned Dutian Devil King, and created a huge disaster which caused countless death. They had also taken part in it and were considered accomplices of the Imperial Academician. If Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor wanted to punish them, they would definitely be executed as well. Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor took a glance at everyone, and when his gaze landed on the dragon Qilin, he nodded his head and smiled. The dragon Qilin immediately struggled to get up and greeted him. Imperial Preceptor. Big Dragon, why do you still have injuries? Hu Linger jumped onto the dragon Qilan's body and asked bewilderedly as she looked at the wound on his butt. "You can't reach your own butt to lick it?" The dragon Qilan gave a dull snort and ignored her. Qin Mu went forward and took out a few bottles of dragon saliva, applying them on the wound of this big fella. The injury on the dragon Qilan's body was quite serious, as Duqian Devil King's gaze had sliced through the dragon scales on his body, and even into the muscles of his butt. Luckily, the dragon scales of this dragon Qilan was extremely durable, and managed to block the gaze of Duqian Devil King, or he would definitely be sliced into two halves. Qin Mu took out a few bottles of dragon saliva to let Chen Wanyun, and the rest to heal the wounds on their bodies. Yun Ke Wan Yun, a bottle is 10,000 great abundance coins. Hu Linger reminded with a good intention. If you don't have the money, you can write a certificate of indebtedness first. Monk Yun Ke's face turned ashen and muttered, "Poor monk is already penniless. I'm truly penniless. After academician coming to Imperial College, poor monk has already become penniless. If I owe so much money, I'm afraid I can only pay them off in the next life. Sister Fox, can you take pity on me?" Qin Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Linger, stop fooling around. I brought them out for experience, so I have the responsibility to treat them when they're injured. Let alone I have the reputation as a divine physician. Physicians treat patients like the parents, so how can he charge them? After the experience, if they get injured again, you can charge them then. If you charge them now, you'll spoil my reputation." Yu Qinghong had planned to ask for one more bottle of dragon saliva as backup, and she dropped her thoughts when she heard that. She thought to herself, he's still thinking of charging money to treat illness. Deep inside him, he's indeed very petty. Si Yunxiang was also injured, therefore she asked for a bottle of dragon saliva from Qin Mu. She pulled Yu Qinghong, and the two girls ran into the forest to undress themselves before helping each other to apply the medicine on their bodies, preventing scars from being left behind. "Sister's figure is really good. I'm not as big." Si Yunxiang measured Yu Qinghong and exclaimed in admiration. Yu Qinghong smiled. "You're still young. When you grow older, they'll become bigger as well. Moreover, it feels slightly uncomfortable when they become bigger, especially when you're running. I'm also not used to wearing a tube top. It would be the best if I could wrap them, however, I can't find a good tailor." Si Yunxiang thought for a moment. "I've heard the academician was also a tailor, and the clothes he makes are quite nice looking. How about?" Yu Qinghong jumped in shock and her black eyes stared wide up. "How can I do that? He's a male." Qin Mu gathered everyone together and said with a grave expression, "The mission of our training has changed. I will have to follow Imperial Preceptor to the southern borders and enter deep into the enemy's territory. Imperial Preceptor's injuries have yet healed, and I have to stay beside him to treat him. If you want to go back, you can leave now." Chan Wanyun and the rest thought of the crucial point and knew there would definitely be danger laying all over this journey, therefore, they were all slightly hesitant. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, "I can give you guys pointers for your cultivation on this journey. The previous time I was invited by your Grand Chancellor, and my lecture didn't last 2 days. This time I'm giving face to the Imperial Academician." These people's eyes lighted up instantly, and Yun Ke chuckled. "Of course we must go deep into the southern borders and see if there are experts in the rebel army. We can't let these rebels look down on our Imperial College. Poor monk will enlighten them with Buddhism, converting them into Buddhists and do good." Qin Mu shook his head secretly. These fellows had still underestimated the danger of this journey. This was a tough road to walk on, and was a road that they might not finish walking even if they put their lives on the line. "Our life and death is now up to fate. Let us see if Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, the #1 man under gods, lives up to his name." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor dressed light and headed to the south. Qin Mu led the rest to follow him while asking Si Yunxiang about their encounters in this battle, and couldn't help sighing ruefully again and again. The fate of Si Yunxiang, Chan Wanyun and the rest were much better than Qin Mu. They were also blown away by Duqian Devil King, but they didn't encounter abnormally strong practitioners like Long Jiaonan. The Dragon Qilan landed not far away from them, and since this Dragon Qilan was huge, they sprinted straight to where the Dragon Qilan was, and when the Heavenly Devil Horde descended, they surrounded the Dragon Qilan and started fighting. Meanwhile, this Dragon Qilan had also fought against the Heavenly Devil Horde that was surging over, and he had an astonishing battle prowess. Si Yunxiang and the rest relied on his power to survive this calamity. Qin Mu was astonished and looked at this dragon Qilin. Hu Linger whispered beside his ears. Young master, big fella has been eating and drinking hours yet he didn't do anything on the journey here. It's even getting better now, protecting others and not protecting us. I think other than squeezing the dragon's saliva out from big fella, we can also squeeze other things out from him. I also think so. Qin Mu nodded his head. He turned his head to look at Heaven Wave City, which was getting further and further away. Now that Eternal Peace's army has entered the city, Long Jiaonan should die in the hands of the army, right? There's also the Dragon King of Dragon Rider sect who should be dead as well. A pity the unique spells of Dragon Rider sect are gone. Great Mountain sect is probably wiped out entirely as well. It's also a pity I didn't manage to learn the spells such as Devil Withdraw Command. When Dutian Devil King was summoned out by him, the Taoists of Great Mountain sect had rushed over and tried to use Devil Withdraw Command to chase Dutian Devil King back to Dutian. However, Dutian Devil King's ability was too powerful and wiped them out in one blow. However, Devil Withdraw Command was an extremely intricate spell that was specially used to deal with devils that were summoned out. If it was executed by a stronger person, they could indeed chase Dutian Devil King back. It's a pity that this spell was lost with the deaths of Great Mountain sect's followers. Heaven Wave City was in a mess and the soldiers were still repairing the city walls. They swept the debris of the collapsed buildings and transferred them out of the city. On the river surface, thousands of ships and boats moved off and carried divisions of the army across the river. The army didn't stop at Heaven Wave City and continued heading to the south. There were still soldiers in Heaven Wave City capturing the remnants of the rebel army and surrounding the Heavenly Devil Horde from Dutian, discovering some commoners that had survived by luck in the process. There were soldiers taking the painting of bandits and walking through the commoners that had survived, comparing them one by one with the paintings. This girl is born pretty. A soldier came to the side of a girl who was at a loss and exclaimed to himself. This girl was dressed in a dark green gown which hung until her feet and her hair was rolled up in a bun. She had beautiful features and the powder on her face was light. Her red lips were like two purple-red pearls and her long shapely eyebrows were very fine. With one look, one would know she was a well-bred young lady from one of the big families in Heaven Wave City. The soldier gave 2 looks before walking elsewhere. The girl's gaze was like spring water and a glistening red jade earring hung on her left ear. Suddenly, the earring moved and stretched its body. That earring was a little red snake which hung through her ear piercing. It looked like it was made from red jade, but it was actually a living thing. If Qin Mu was here, he will definitely command the soldiers to take down this woman. He had seen before the real face of Long Jiaonan. The whole body of Long Jiaonan had been seen by him when she was shedding her skin, and there was no makeup on this woman who had just crawled out from her skin. Now that she had regained her female getup, she looked completely different from the pretty young master of Dragon Rider sect. The soldiers were currently moving the corpses in the city and throwing them onto the cart before pushing the cart to bury them outside the city. Long Jiaonan followed behind them while crying. Sirs, is my father's corpse inside? The few soldiers stopped and said, Little maiden, there are too many corpses in the city. We don't know which one is your father. Do you see him on the cart? Long Jiaonan took a look and shook his head. No, a soldier said. He's most likely in the burial mounds outside the city. General, you ordered us to dig a few huge pits there to bury the corpses. All the corpses were moved there and they haven't been covered up. Does little maiden want to follow us there to have a look? Long Jiaonan gave her thanks and followed these soldiers to the burial mounds outside of the city. There was a huge pit dug up here which was dozens of yards deep and thousands of corpses were piled up here. Long Jiaonan raised her head and saw dozens of such huge pits other than this huge pit in the burial mounds. Beside the pit, there were soldiers that were pushing the carts forward and dumping the corpses into the pit. Long Jiaonan looked around and suddenly shouted, Father, father! Daughter is here to find you. If you can hear me, please answer me. She shouted a few times and those soldiers didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This woman has most likely gone crazy. At this moment, a weak voice came from a huge pit. I'm here, I'm currently shedding my skin, but I was too heavily injured. The soldiers beside the huge pit were stupefied and an officer suddenly shouted, There's something wrong. Everyone on your guards. When Long Jiaonan heard this voice, she gave a hidden smile. Xiaohong. The incomparably tiny red snake hanging on her left ear stretched its body and dropped down from her ear. When it landed on the ground, its size increased all of a sudden and turned into a huge snake in a blink of an eye. Poisonous gas spewed out as it opened its mouth, and the soldiers around the burial mounds collapsed here and there. The huge snake slithered like wind and swallowed the soldiers one by one. Meanwhile, Long Jiaonan walked into the pit and threw the corpses aside. She finally dug out the Dragon King, who was buried among the corpses. Daughter thought father had died. Long Jiaonan chuckled. Daughter. Dragon Rider Sex Dragon King snorted coldly. Long Jiaonan's expression changed slightly and lowered her head. Son had thought father had died. The Dragon King sat up. I feigned death by going into hibernation to bluff that devil god, thus I was thrown into this burial mound as a corpse. Not sure how Red Dragon is doing. He pinched his lips and gave off a low whistle. Not long later, a little monster, that seemed like a snake that was yet not a snake, a dragon that was yet not a dragon, crawled out from the forest. The Dragon King let out a sigh of relief and checked on the injuries of the Red Dragon. Red Dragon and I have to shed our skins and rest for a period of time. Good son, I'll leave this period of time to you. Let us go. Long Jiaonan summoned the huge snake over, and the demon gas surged out from the huge snake as it rose into the sky, carrying 2 humans and 1 dragon as it whooshed away. Only now did the soldiers in Heaven Wave City reacted over, but it was too late for them to give chase. Who was the one who has created such a trouble which caused such a huge defeat? The Dragon King asked. How many of us from Dragon Rider sect have survived? Only we're left. Long Jiaonan snorted coldly. I've heard the scholars of Imperial College refer to him as Academician Qin. He was the one that had summoned the devil god and wiped out our Dragon Rider sect. It's a shame that your son is incapable and let him escape. We father and son are still alive, so Dragon Rider sect isn't considered completely wiped out. The Dragon King said coldly. As long as we know who he is, things would be easy. Such an enmity, we have to take revenge. We must tear him into 1,000 pieces. Qin Mu and the rest followed Imperial Preceptor to the south, and not long after, the army has rushed forth from behind and passed by them as they headed forward. They continued walking at a steady pace. Qin Mu grabbed the chance to ask Imperial Preceptor for advice. Imperial Preceptor is a wise man and student has one thing that I can't solve. May I ask Imperial Preceptor for advice? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor asked in astonishment. Who did you learn your flattery from? You're pretty adept at it. Qin Mu was bewildered. Is this considered flattery? Yu Qinghong Yun Ke? Chan Wan Yun and the rest nodded their heads repeatedly. Even Si Yunxiang was nodding endlessly. Qin Mu muttered. My elder taught me this. My elder is a cripple who is always smiling. His words are pleasant but his actions are ruthless. Let's not talk about this. Imperial Preceptor, I would like to ask you, in Spirit Embryo Realm, the Spirit Embryo is very useful for the overall controlling of one's vital chi, but 5 Elements Realm seems a little. He gave some thoughts before continuing. A little weak. There seems to be great power in 5 Elements Realm, yet it's hard to unleash it. For example, there are 5 gods in 5 Elements Realm and each god has its own strong points. However, how can we let the 5-element divine treasure unleash its power? This question caught the attention of Chan Wanyun and the rest. They had also thought about Qin Mu's question before, but they had not come to a conclusion. 5-element realm was indeed a little weak compared to Spirit Embryo Realm. Their cultivation had grown, but that was it, it had no qualitative leap. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was astonished. You guys haven't discovered the secret of 5 elements? Or should I say, Imperial College hasn't taught you guys? Qin Mu shook his head. Chan Wanyun and the rest also shook their heads. The directorates of this generation isn't capable. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor sighed ruefully. They don't even teach this now, the current directorates must be the lousiest directorates. 5 Elements Divine Treasure is the 5 Phases Divine Treasure. With 5 phases concealed inside, they correspond to the 5 element star sovereigns in the sky. These 5 gods are gods of the Sovereign King level, and not any minor gods. When you guys execute your techniques, do you feel an abnormality? An unknown energy going into your body from the sky, resonating with the 5 elements star sovereigns. Everyone nodded repeatedly. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, this is the power of the 5 elements. Gold element corresponds to gold, fire element corresponds to fire, water element corresponds to water, wood element corresponds to wood, earth corresponds to earth. Activating these 5 kinds of energy could allow you to control the power of the 5 elements. Have the 5 elements star sovereigns return to their own star palace. Everyone nodded their heads again. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor sighed. What Imperial College teaches is too shallow, too superficial. What do the directorates teach now? They don't even teach anything profound. 5 elements star sovereign entering the star palace means you have mastered the power of the 5 elements, which is also the power of the 5 phases. As long as the power of the 5 elements integrates into your vital qi, there would be 5 more kinds of attributes in your vital qi. He raised his palm and a golden shield appeared in front of him. Gold. Wood. After the golden shield disappeared, the vegetation around grew frantically. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, water. Huge waves then surged forward and lifted all of them up, allowing them to float in midair as they stepped on the waves. Fire. Fire clouds rose into the sky and carried Qinmu and the rest up, allowing them to move forward on the fire clouds. Earth. The ground churned as countless mud and rocks floated into the sky to form a huge ball of earth. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor dispelled these 5 kinds of energy, and everyone landed back on the ground gently. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, the power the 5 elements allows you to control is different from the power the spirit embryo allows you to control. It's different from the 4 kinds of vital qi, which are green dragon, vermilion bird, black tortoise, and white tiger. These 4 kinds of vital qi can't be simply classified as wood, fire, water, gold, and instead, every kind of vital qi has 5 phases concealed inside. Why are you guys looking like you're listening to the heavenly book? You don't understand. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was bewildered and shook his head. The scholars of your batch is too dumb, the lousiest batch I have ever taught. Chen Wanyun and the rest received a huge blow, and Si Yunxiang also couldn't accept it. Qin Mu felt that it was not because they were too stupid but because Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was too clever. For an incomparable talent that appeared once every 500 years, he could understand any logic with just one explanation and one hint. He didn't even need others to guide him, and he could naturally comprehend numerous reasons. However, other people didn't have his heaven-defying comprehension. There was a huge gap even between the talents. Even though Chen Wanyun and the rest were talents of 1 in 10,000s with outstanding aptitudes or outstanding comprehension, they were far inferior when compared to a monster that appears once every 500 years whose aptitudes and comprehension were the first in the world. Things that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor thought were simple actually needed them to calm down and comprehend. The difference in talent between Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and them was literally heaven and earth. Take Green Dragon Vital Qi as an example. Do you think Green Dragon Vital Qi is really the wood attribute? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor guided them patiently. Have you seen a real green dragon? I have, and the green dragon I saw could control the wind and lightning, fire and water, not just the wood attribute. Moreover, what's wood attribute? If you hug a plank and bite it twice, is that wood attribute? Don't assume Green Dragon Vital Qi has the wood attribute just because there's a green word in Green Dragon. If you assume that way, you really have a wooden head. Everyone was given another blow, and even Qin Mu felt a sense of setback. Even he who was learned had thought Green Dragon Vital Qi was the wood attribute, but thinking about it now, there was no trace of wood attribute when Old Ma executed Green Dragon Vital Qi. Instead, there was wind and lightning interweaving. Looked like there was indeed somewhat deviation from what he knew. Without Imperial Preceptor pointing it out, he would probably continue having the misconception. There are actually many techniques for 5 elements divine treasure that you can learn from. Some of them are specialized in opening the battle power of 5 elements divine treasure. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, the battle power of 5 elements realm is very astonishing, but it's also fine if you can't cultivate it. It won't affect you in breaking through other divine treasures. You will only be slightly weaker in the future. But this slight gap would gradually magnify as you grow, and the more divine treasure you open, the larger the gap will become. He drew 2 triangles in the sky. One had a smaller angle on the top and the other had a bigger angle on the top. He then drew 6 horizontal lines in the triangle and said, each of the 7 lines in the picture represents the power of each realm. The second line is the 5 elements realm. If you don't cultivate properly, the second line would be a little shorter than others, then the third line would be much shorter. When you reach the bottom of the triangle, which is the divine bridge realm, at that time you will be shorter than the others by a whole chunk, and the difference in power is literally halved. If the opponent wants to kill you, he just needs 1 or 2 moves. His example was very direct and shook them. 2 people who clearly didn't have much difference in spirit embryo realm and 5 elements realm actually had such a huge gap between them when they cultivated to divine bridge realm. There were not many people who actually thought about this point and only cared about raising their cultivation realm. Si Yunxiang suddenly asked, "What's Imperial Preceptor's line? Compared to the other cult masters of divine bridge realm, how big is your angle?" Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor drew a straight line in the sky and said indifferently, "I'm this. No matter how strong other people's cultivation is, their angle will always be smaller than mine." He dared to say so because of his heaven-defying aptitudes and comprehension. He practically had no shortcomings. Other people were 7 parallel lines while his was 7 lines overlaying each other, which was much stronger than others. You can take reference from the techniques that are related to 5 elements divine treasure and floor of heavenly record, such as Minutes of Suppressing Stars written by Elder Ru Xianqin, Struggle of the 5 Phases written by Monk Yuan Kong, and also 5 Laws of Jupiter written by Duke Wei, 5 Vitals of Military Discipline by General of Heavenly Strategies. After reading all of them, you will build a strong foundation for your 5 elements realm. These people he had mentioned were the first-ranking high officials of the current imperial court. Elder Xianqin was a woman who held the appointment as the Grand Tutor of the Crown Prince. Monk Yuan Kong held the appointment as Grand Marshal, and there was no need to mention about Duke Wei. General of Heavenly Strategies was the head of the reputable Qin family. These few people that were either born from aristocratic families or well-known, were all cult master-level existences that had reached the divine bridge realm. Everyone hurriedly memorized the names of the techniques down. Chun Wanyun felt a little contradictory. He had planned to enter 6 Directions realm directly after this experience, but after listening to Imperial Preceptor's words, he made up his mind to continue suppressing his realm. He would only break the 6 Directions wall after he returned to Imperial College and strengthened his foundation. Qin Mu was stunned. He suddenly thought of some techniques in great educational heavenly devil scriptures which were specially used for cultivating 5 elements divine treasure. There was a wide array of techniques in great education heavenly devil scriptures, and most of the techniques didn't look too intricate and couldn't be considered top-notch techniques. These techniques were usually imparted to the disciples. Almost all the techniques and divine arts in great educational heavenly devil scriptures were imparted out and weren't kept away because of its value. However, there were some techniques that were difficult to understand and were easy to cultivate wrongly, therefore they carried the reputation as a devil cult. Qin Mu originally didn't further study these techniques, but after Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's pointers, he instantly came to realize, wasn't the techniques that seemed stand-alone in great educational heavenly devil scriptures the secret to cultivation? These techniques that seemed scattered and not powerful didn't only consist of the method to cultivate 5 elements realm. There were probably the techniques for 6 Directions realm, 7 Stars realm, and even Celestial Being, Life and Death, and Divine Bridge. These techniques were learned by each Hall Master of Heavenly Devil Cult before imparting down to the followers, and thus formed the 360 halls. Qin Mu had treated these techniques as weak, and didn't incorporate them into Unity technique. Now the unintentional words from Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had instead pointed out a clear path to him. Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique has technique but no skills. It has inadequacies, but it might just be a perfect combination if combining it with great educational, heavenly devil scriptures. Qin Mu was filled with excitement, and immediately comprehended the cultivation methods of 5 elements realm. These 5 methods were Saturn Sovereign's Earth Marquis True Technique, Jupiter Sovereign's Wood Marquis True Technique, Mercury Sovereign's Water Marquis True Technique, Mars Sovereign's Fire Marquis True Technique, and Venus Sovereign's Gold Marquis True Technique. Not long after, he started to try to merge these 5 true techniques into the 5 elements realms technique of Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique. Yu Qinghong and the rest were consulting sword skills from Imperial Preceptor, and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor chatted as they walked, saying everything that he knew. However, before they could comprehend it, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had already moved to the next point, which vexed them. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's explanation wasn't considered fast. It was just hard for them to comprehend immediately and had to spend the time to slowly comprehend it. However, they didn't dare to clarify it as they were afraid they would be once again crowned as the lousiest class. After Yu Qinghong had consulted him about sword skills, Monk Yun Ke asked him about Buddhist skills. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor also had attainments on Buddhist skills and had entered Great Thunderclap Monastery before to consult old Rulai. His speech naturally was like a deluge of heavenly flowers. After Yun Ke had consulted him, Chan Wanyun asked him about the fusion of sword skills and battle techniques. After he cultivated with Chancellor Ba Shan for a period of time, Chancellor Ba Shan had imparted 7 ways of the hegemon to him, and also gave him pointers on the cultivation of his sword skills. Thus Chan Wanyun had walked down the path of cultivating both knife and sword. Si Yunxiang also consulted Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor some questions on cultivation, and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor paid more attention to her, explaining in detail and slightly more than others. When Si Yunxiang followed the young patriarch to cultivate, she had met him a few times and got his pointers in the past. The wolf slave hesitated for a moment and puckered up his courage to consult knife skills from him. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor took a look at him and asked, "Warrior of Wolf Store Country?" The wolf slave nodded his head in anxiousness. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was unconcerned and said, "Education is for everyone irrespective of background. I don't care what race you are." After he had said that, he gave him pointers for his sword skills and didn't hide anything he knew, not stopping before he had said it through. Not long after, everyone fell silent as they were comprehending his words without a sound. Even though Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor didn't say much, it was enough for them to comprehend for a while. "Imperial Preceptor, have you studied demon cultivation before?" Hu Linger broke the silence as she asked him on Dragon Qilin's head. Eternal Peace shook his head. "Never did." Hu Linger's eyes lighted up and said with a crisp voice, "I can teach you." She looked very serious. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor also asked seriously, "May I ask for your guidance?" Hu Linger told him about what she had learned through cultivation, and told him about the knowledge she had learned from the collection of books from Surging River Dragon Palace. She even told him about spirit creation technique, which was mixed with her own comprehension. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor listened silently, and when Hu Linger was finished, he suddenly asked, "The demon race has no divine treasure?" Hearing about what you have learned through cultivation, there was no cultivation related to divine treasure. Hu Linger shook her head and replied, "We don't, therefore we have to work hard to cultivate to a human form. Once we have a human form, we would be a demon king, which is very powerful. I've also seen a few demon kings before, and they indeed have unusual abilities." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, "The spirit techniques you mentioned earlier to change your form was very interesting. This technique seems to have countless changes." He explained spirit creation technique in detail, and Hu Linger became more and more enthralled. When Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was done, she then came back to her senses and cried out in astonishment, "I said just now that I wanted to teach you. How did it become you're teaching me?" Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, "We teach each other." Hu Linger nodded her head heavily. The dragon Qilin under her but snorted and rolled his eyes. At this moment, lights actually appeared in the sky which flew towards them. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor took a look and his gaze landed on Qin Mu's body. Those lights gathered and entered Qin Mu's body from the top of his head. More and more lights appeared and gradually turned into a slender flow of light that had a fire-red color. Hu Linger gave a touch and a tuft of fur on her paw was burned. She immediately pulled back her paw. Not long after, Qin Mu's aura increased exponentially and flames poured out from his body, surrounding him like fire clouds. Hu Linger was still astonished when she heard 2 popping sounds as 2 bull horns grew out from his head. His nostrils started to gradually rise and pushed outwards, spewing out 2 trails of white smoke which carried flames. Hu Linger cried out in astonishment and heard 2 cracking sounds as the bones in Qin Mu's bone transformed bizarrely. His thighs became thicker and his body also grew taller. His muscles started bulging outwards and flame markings covered his entire body. A bullseye popped out on his forehead right at the heart of his brows. Hu Linger then saw a bull's tail drooping down behind Qin Mu's buttocks, which had also become larger, looking like the large and firm buttocks of a bull. His tail whipped twice on the firm buttocks, which he reckoned was very painful. Imperial Preceptor. Hu Ling'er was stunned for a moment before turning her head to tell Imperial Preceptor, "My young master has revealed his true form." His true form? He's not a fox demon, he's a bull demon. This is not a demon but a kind of god transformation, to transform into the shape of gods. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was used to this sight and explained to Hu Ling'er. He naturally could see that this wasn't Qinmu revealing his true form and was a peculiar technique instead. It seemed to be the effect by merging a few techniques of Heavenly Devil Sect together. It seems to be Spirit Creation Technique, merging with the Mars technique of 5 Elements Realm. He had little knowledge about great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures, so he wasn't too sure. Qinmu's body shapeshifting was considered god transformation, and some techniques could achieve that as well. It wasn't rare and it was one type of body divine arts. The techniques of some sects specially relied on god transformation and devil transformation to upgrade their bodies. However, Qinmu's god transformation made Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor puzzled. It didn't seem like it was just a body divine art. Body divine art was naturally used to upgrade one's body, and relied on one's strong body to increase their battle ability. Whereas Qinmu's god transformation seemed to be god transformation. In Imperial Preceptor's eyes, Qinmu relied on his technique to turn himself into the appearance of Mars Sovereign. When his corporeal body changed, his vital qi also changed at the same time. Even the aura he was giving off has also changed. Which also means he obtained the body and the divine arts under the state of god transformation. Now this was very strange. The transformation on Qinmu's body had yet stopped and fire clouds churned under his feet, gradually turning into 2 fire dragons. The fire dragons became longer and larger, lifting his body from the ground. Qinmu stepped on the fire dragons and his feet ripped apart his shoes as they turned into 2 flaming hooves. The him now was like Mars Sovereign who was stepping on 2 fire dragons. Qinmu raised his hand and the surroundings instantly became incomparably dry as fireballs that were the size of goose's egg flew around in the sky. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor gave off an interested expression as he looked at these fireballs that were neither too big nor too small. Suddenly, sword lights which were formed by fine flames burst forth from each and every one of the fireballs. Each sword light was executing Sunset Sword skill, and there was also the power of fire attribute spells in the sword skill at the same time. Therefore the power of each sword wasn't weak at all. Sunset Sword skill of Yuan Empire very orthodox, which also has the marvel of sword pellets. Combining the power of the spells, your strength could basically be compared to a divine arts practitioner's. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor sighed. If you clash face to face with a divine arts practitioner of 6 Directions realm, you won't die. If you can unleash the body divine art of god transformation, you can rival divine arts practitioners of 6 Direction realm. Qinmu's sword skill retracted and returned to the fireballs. The fireballs collided with one another, forming a red sun that was as huge as a basin. He then opened his mouth to swallow that red sun into his mouth, spewing 2 trails of flames from his bull's nose. He stopped executing Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique, and the 2 bull's horns on his head gradually shrank. His body also slowly returned to normal, and the 2 fire dragons under his feet slowly dispersed. Qinmu touched his buttocks and gave off a puzzled expression. There was a searing pain on his buttocks as if someone had whipped his a few times. Could it be that I'm used to herding cows ever since I was young, therefore I like to whip the buttocks of a cow? The cowherd boy from disabled elderly village thought suspiciously to himself. There was a mighty mountain in front where the waterfall fell from the sky, which seemed like an upside-down Milky Way. The white color of the waterfall, the black color of the cliff, the greenery of the mountain peak, and the sun hanging over their heads formed an ink painting of the mountain and river. The sound of the water was deafening, and there was dense water vapor traveling over. Fine mist was everywhere in the air, which landed on everyone's body, making their clothes slightly damp after a while. This place made people feel delighted and relaxed. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor brought them to the southern borders, and didn't take any official path. They determined the direction and continued walking, which had now brought them to the mountains. The waterfall formed a deep pool which was clear, and there was a buck with branching horn beside the pool, swaying its short tail and eating the turf grass. There were white spots with the shape of plum blossom on its body. When it saw them walking over, the buck immediately raised its head and sized them up while taking 2 steps forward. Everyone exclaimed handsome secretly. This buck was about the same size as the dragon Chilan, looking very majestic. That buck puffed from its nostrils and came to the side of the pool. There was an elder in woven rush raincoat beside the pool, and he stabbed his fishing pole on the shore to fish. There was a child beside this elder, who was older than a kid but younger than a teenager. He picked up stones in boredom and threw at where the elder's hook was. This child didn't just throw 1 or 2 pieces, instead he kept throwing. This waterfall was so huge and the current was so urgent, even if there was fish, they wouldn't eat the bait. Plus the fact that this child was throwing rocks continuous into consideration, this elder didn't need to think of catching anything today. Yu Qinghong shook his head. This child is his own, otherwise he would have smacked him to death. Who can endure this? Qin Mu revealed a puzzled expression and looked around. This wasn't a fishing spot, and yet there was an elder fishing here. There was a child throwing rocks at the hook. No matter how he looked, this elder didn't seem to be here for fishing. In such wilderness where footprints were rare, they could only be blocking the way if they weren't fishing. In addition to this plum blossom buck that was no inferior to the dragon Chilan, the identity of this elder was probably in existence on the same level as the young patriarch. Chen Wanyun and Si Yunxiang also noticed something wrong, and looked towards Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. Monk Yunke didn't think so much and went up to inquire with a smile. Elder, how could there be fish here? This must be your grandson, right? With your grandson throwing the rocks continuously, even if there's fish, they would have been spooked. The elder raised his head and revealed a face full of wrinkles while smiling. How come there are no fish? Didn't the fish just arrive? Yunke looked towards his hook and didn't see any fish. He only saw that brat still throwing rocks. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor came forward and said cynically, even though this pool isn't big, the fish isn't small and would be hard to catch. I wonder if Elder has the ability to. Wrinkles creased up on the Elder's face as he smiled. This world was originally a pool of clear water. A big fish came to stir up this water. This huge fish should have jumped through the dragon's gate to become a true dragon. Yet it not only stirred up the water, but also wanted to eat the small fishes, clearing them all. Imperial Preceptor, you decide, should I fish up this big fish or not? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's gaze flickered and said at a speed that neither fast nor slow. Isn't it a little inappropriate for Elder to compare sex to small fishes, am I right? Sex should be leeches that cling onto the bodies of fishes. Even though the water looks clear, the fishes in the water are all bitten by the leeches, and in that case, we shouldn't fish and instead, we should drug and get rid of the leeches. The Elder did not speak another word. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor didn't speak as well. When words get sour, saying any more was useless. They had already said a few sentences and felt that they couldn't convince each other, so it was useless if they continued talking. Since their ideals were different and they can't convince each other, it would be better to eradicate the other side and be much more straightforward and refreshing to just destroy the other side's ideal. That Elder got up and pulled out his fishing rod and line. Placing the fishing rod vertically upwards beside a huge tree, he took down his straw hat and woven rush raincoat. He waved his hand to signal the brat beside him to move back. Go to the mountainside. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said to Qin Mu and the rest, go past the mountain and wait for me there. Elder, have you passed down your abilities? That Elder nodded. I've passed them down. What about Imperial Preceptor? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said indifferently, I have no need. I was too hot-headed in my early days and killed too many people, eradicating too many sections. This resulted in many unique skills of numerous sects being lost. This was something I often regret after setting up Floor of Heavenly Records. Therefore from then on, I would always have the habit to ask this before I kill people. Even though Qin Mu wanted to stay and witness this battle that was rarely seen, the blast from the collision of existences at the level of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor would probably be even more violent than Dutian Devil King. If he observed the battle from such a close distance, he was sure to die. Let us cross the mountain, Qin Mu said sternly. He brought everyone up to this high mountain and looked down. The two people below the waterfall had been covered up by the mist and couldn't be seen clearly. The brat throwing the rock was riding the huge buck and was not far away from them. He blinked his eyes innocently. You guys are from Imperial College? Chunwan nodded his head and asked, "How do I address brother?" "Muron Wang Muron." His age was similar to Qin Mu, but he presented a different steadiness when compared to Qin Mu. This Wang Muron was extremely active and couldn't sit still. He would feel bored the moment he became silent. He couldn't stay still even when riding the huge buck, slapping the bucks but to run over. Qin Mu asked, "Which sect is Brother Wang from?" "Little Jade Capital." "Little Jade Capital?" Chanwan Yun K and the rest were slightly at a loss. They had not heard about this sect before. There were 3 big sacred grounds in Eternal Peace Empire and some large-scale sects that were not inferior to the 3 big sacred grounds. However, Little Jade Capital wasn't among them. Qin Mu was stunned. The 2 words Jade Capital weren't words anyone could use. Jade Capital referred to the capital city where the Celestial Emperor lived, and this Celestial Emperor wasn't God and was an immortal, the Celestial Emperor of Immortals. Which sect was so daring to take the name Little Jade Capital? There are very little people living in the sacred ground of our Little Jade Capital. They were all mainly old men and old women. There aren't many that are of the same age as me, Wang Muron said. This time there was someone who came to visit and found my master. He asked my master to pay a visit to Imperial Preceptor, saying that Imperial Preceptor was walking the path of the devil and wanted to eradicate all the sects in the world. My master was originally unwilling to do it, but it was hard for him to turn down a friend's request. Therefore he had brought me out to take a look around. The sects in this world have already been nearly eradicated by Imperial Preceptor, and his actions are indeed no different from the devil. Hu Linger was bewildered. Aren't we the righteous side? I feel Imperial Preceptor's actions are very righteous. Wang Muron shook his head. You are all hawks and hounds of the Imperial Court, the claws and teeth of Imperial Preceptor, having a very bad reputation. Qin Mu was puzzled. He felt Imperial Preceptor's action was still okay and righteous. Furthermore, Imperial Preceptor also had an air of righteousness, and everything he did seemed normal and righteous to Qin Mu. How did it turn into the path of the devil in other people's eyes? Furthermore, how did they, the Imperial Scholars, become the hawks and hounds of the Imperial Court, the claws and teeth of Imperial Preceptor, having a bad reputation? Righteous and evil, it's maybe just a matter of how you see it. Qin Mu thought to himself. Hu Linger asked, Muron, if your master dies, what would you do? Wang Muron was brimming with confidence while shaking his head. No one can kill my master, his abilities. At this moment, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor walked over and said to Wang Muron, Go and retrieve your master's body. Before he died, he had told me he had passed down all his abilities to you. This is very good, cultivate well. Wang Muron was stunned and he suddenly jumped off the buck's back to sprint towards the waterfall. A moment later, his whales traveled over. Lit Jade Capital is pretty remarkable. I've heard of this sect that has some connections with the heavens above. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said. Li City is right ahead. I'm injured, so you will have to grab some herbs to treat me. Qin Mu nodded his head. Imperial Preceptor's injury is difficult to treat. The medicine I prescribe would definitely be very complicated. Wang Muron carried the fishing elder's corpse and placed it on the back of the buck. He rode the buck and caught up with Qin Mu, Imperial Preceptor and the rest while shouting, Imperial Preceptor, I'll take revenge for my master. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor turned his head back and looked very serious. Your master's skill ain't bad. After you have mastered them, pass down the abilities to your own disciples, and don't let his abilities die away. Wang Muron gave a shout and clouds formed below the buck's feet as it sprinted into the sky, gradually disappearing. Someone invited this old softy from Little Jade Capital to test the waters, therefore he certainly deserves his death. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor retracted his gaze and said to Qin Mu and the rest, Little Jade Capital is a mysterious place that stands aloof from worldly affairs. They have an extremely ancient background. Even I only heard rumors about Little Jade Capital before, and it was my first time meeting an expert of Little Jade Capital. They indeed have some means, but they are behind times. They do not come out frequently and couldn't witness the advancement in the techniques of other sections. It's easy to fall behind times by limiting themselves in a closed environment. Bear in mind, you can never be an expert if you only concentrate on cultivating, without having regard for what is happening in the outside world. Qin Mu and the rest nodded their heads in acknowledgement and felt respect in their hearts. This fishing elder was actually invited by others to test the waters? Are they using this elder's life to test how deep the water of eternal peace Imperial Preceptor was? This struggle has already begun. Qin Mu's gaze wavered as he thought to himself, Li City. Eternal Peace Empire's army had already invaded this place, and when they came, the battle had already ended. The battle shouldn't be too intense. Qin Mu looked around and saw the city walls were still considered complete. The army of Eternal Peace had directly pushed forward and met the rebel army outside the city, eradicating them straight away. There are Hall of Array Element, floor of military secrets in Imperial College where they taught formation skills and the art of war. With the sects facing the army of Eternal Peace directly, their end is evident. He thought secretly to himself. Li City wasn't destroyed by the battles, therefore, the people here were still considered safe. Qin Mu came to the herb shop and grabbed a few herbs from each and every herb shop. After visiting about a dozen herb shops, almost half a day had passed by and night fell. Qin Mu and the rest stayed at the Yamen of Li City. The magistrate of Li City had been captured and sent under escort to the imperial court. Not long after, a fragrant medicinal smell came out from the Yamen, and about an hour later, a maid carried a basin out and poured the basin of medicinal dregs on the stone pavement. Another hour later, that maid carried out another basin of medicinal dregs and poured it on the pavement, letting people to trample on them. That happened a third time, and 7 basins of medicinal dregs were poured in one night. After daybreak, Qin Mu and the rest didn't start out to the south until half a day had passed. In the herb shop of Li City, there was a middle-aged scholar in green clothing and white inner shirt standing behind the counter. He flipped through dozens of prescriptions, and these prescriptions recorded the few herbs Qin Mu had grabbed from the dozen of herb shops. That's not right. These herbs are completely useless. These herbs aren't for healing injuries. This brat is shrewd. The middle-aged scholar raised his head and smiled, as expected of the little divine physician that's well known in the capital city. You don't want me to know from the herbs how serious Imperial Preceptor's injury is. How sly. However, you're underestimating me, Spiritual Master Dao Quan. Spiritual Master, here are the medicinal dregs. A few young apothecaries came from outside, and each of them carried a basin which was filled with medicinal dregs. Spiritual Master Dao Quan checked them one by one. After a moment, he calculated to himself, this little divine physician is indeed shrewd. He purposely mixed other medicinal dregs in so that I can't see how Imperial Preceptor was treated. However, to play this kind of tricks in front of me, you're still too inexperienced. Disciples, grab the herbs. He said the names of the herbs, and the young apothecaries immediately fetched the spirit herbs over. Spiritual Master Dao Quan muttered to himself and organized them into categories. He changed the arrangement a few more times and ordered his disciples to start the furnace to refine the herbs when he felt that there was no mistake. After a few hours, Spiritual Master Dao Quan looked at the medicine he had refined. The first medicine was a herbal soup which was incomparably intense. The second one was a medicinal ointment for applying externally to dispel poison. The third one was a spirit pill that was the size of the tip of a pinky finger. The pill was silver in color and filled with spikes. With just a gentle touch, one would be pricked by the gold chi coming out from the spirit pill. The fourth medicine was a milky white gas that had settled down on the bottom of the furnace. The fifth medicine was a cup of dark red liquid which evaporated very fast. The sixth and seventh medicines were also spirit pills, but their medicinal properties were different. Spiritual Master Dao Quan checked the 7 medicines, and his expression changed slightly as he exclaimed in admiration, "This little divine physician is remarkable, truly remarkable. With his method of healing, all injuries of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor would be completely healed over in the shortest time of 20 days, or no more than half a year." He brought 7 medicines and instantly leaped into the air, turning into a trail of light in the sky. This trail of light flew for half a day towards the southern borders and landed in Dali City of the southern borders after 1,000 miles. Dali City was the biggest city in the southern borders. This place was a country back then which advocated the Buddhist doctrine. There were at least 3,600 temples within the county, having the reputation of the Western Paradise in the south. It was later annexed by Eternal Peace. Spiritual Master Dao Quan landed in the most glorious Luoguang Temple, and walked quickly into the temple. There were about a dozen existences of the cult master level in the temple. They all rose up. Spiritual Master Dao Quan is here. The man who wore a bronze mask welcomed him and smiled. Spiritual Master Dao Quan must have brought us good news this time. You're right. Spiritual Master Dao Quan took out 7 kinds of medicines and placed them in a line. This time Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had competed with Wanderer Zhan of Little Jade Capital. Even though he had killed Wanderer Zhan, he must have gotten injured as well. Having Little Divine Physician beside him on this journey, I had thought the Little Divine Physician would help treat him. Therefore, the medicine used would reveal the state of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's injuries. These 7 medicines were the medicine Little Divine Physician had refined last night. May everyone have a look. High Official Ma Lianshan asked in astonishment. Spiritual Master Dao Quan normally doesn't give in to heaven nor earth and believes he is the #1 in the art of healing. And even Little Poison King has to flatter you. How come you're calling a little brat divine physician today? Spiritual Master Dao Quan said solemnly. In the past, I viewed highly of myself because no one could be compared to me in terms of medical knowledge. They were just quacks that knew some prescriptions, that's all. Even Little Poison King had merely inherited Jade Face Poison King's abilities and didn't have any contributions on his own. Furthermore, I despise his character. Someone who would even betray his master makes me hold him in contempt. However, this little divine physician is indeed worthy of his title. He pointed at the first medicine and said, "This is the herbal soup the little divine physician brewed using dozens of herbs. Just the poisonous herbs alone take up more than half of the soup. This herbal soup help in stimulating the soul and cure the injuries on the soul." Is Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's soul injured? An old man panted. He's indeed injured. I had used my Pure Yang 36 Heavenly Spirit Star Fiends to injure his soul, but he had also injured me. Spiritual Master Dao Quan said, "This herbal soup is to treat the injury of his soul, which exactly what he needed. The second medicine is an ointment. Does Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor has an external injury which carries fire poison?" Another old woman grinned. Spiritual Master is very accurate. There is fire poison hidden in my technique. When we ambushed Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor then, I had managed to land a hit on the back of his heart. Little Divine Physician's ointment helps in getting rid of the fire poison. Spiritual Master Dao Quan pointed at the third medicine. There is gold chi hidden in this spirit pill which is extremely sharp. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor should have suffered from some venomous insect or wood poison. Who used wood poison or venomous insect when injuring Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor that day? Another elder chuckled. When we 3 ambushed Imperial Preceptor then, I used venomous insects. Then that's it. Spiritual Master Dao Quan continued. The fourth medicine is for steaming technique. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor has injuries in his 7 great divine treasures, thus it's hard for the medicinal properties to infiltrate. Therefore this little divine physician turned the medicinal energy into gas, steaming Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor in the steamer. The cult masters in Luoguang Temple smiled. Why didn't he get cooked by steaming? Other than that, there are still some hidden dangers not written off, therefore. This little divine physician then used acupuncture and moxibustion. Those needles are hollow and the 5th medicine is hidden in the needles. This medicine evaporates very fast and will seep into his skin after entering his body. Spiritual Master Dao Quan pointed to the 6th medicine and said, "This medicine is used to strengthen the body, to strengthen the effect of this treatment." The 7th medicine is a supplement which is used to nourish Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's body. After this test, I can already confirm without a doubt that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor has yet recovered. He gave an exclaim of admiration and continued. However, giving this little divine physician a month's time, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor would be nursed back to his peak performance and all his injuries would be healed without any hidden danger left behind. The Palace Master of Passion Parting Palace frowned as she said softly, "Everyone, Imperial Preceptor's injuries seem to be more serious than we expected." That man wearing the bronze mask smiled. "That's because he met Wanderer Zhan of Little Jade Capital. I had known Wanderer Zhan back in the days and had close connections with him. It's just that after he had gone to Little Jade Capital, we had lesser dealings with each other. Wanderer Zhan is also at the peak of Divine Bridge Realm, and not much inferior compared to Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. Spiritual Master Dao Quan said, Wanderer Zhan of Little Jade Capital has already died. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor killed him. I felt the pulses coming from the mountain when I was at Li City. Passion-parting Palace Master's gaze landed on the man with the bronze mask, seemingly wanting to know whose face it was underneath the mask. You made use of your friendship with Wanderer Zhan from the early days to send him to his death? Aren't you too scheming? Ever since I met you, you have been always wearing a mask and don't dare to show your face. You betrayed your friend and hide your identity. This makes me very worried. If I'm betrayed by you, I'm afraid I won't even know who betrayed me. Palace Master Chiu, you can be at ease. There is definitely nothing going wrong with him. Passion-parting Palace Master Chiu Jie looked towards the source of the sound and saw the person speaking was one of the three wonders of Three Wonders Castle, Big Castle Lord Che Zhengli, the father of Imperial Consort Che in the capital city. After he had rebelled, Imperial Consort Che was implicated by him, and now it wasn't known if she was dead or alive in the cold palace. Passion-parting Palace Master said indifferently, Really no problem? Just because you said so? Castle Lord Che, don't forget you're also a relative of the royal family. Che Zhengli's expression changed slightly and was about to say something when an old woman laughed. Palace Master, there is no problem with this person's identity. The old woman who spoke this was one of the three strong practitioners of the old generation that had ambushed Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. Since that she had said no problem, Passion-parting Palace Master could only restrain herself. Since Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor is still suffering from his serious injuries, should we give him time to recuperate? The bronze masked man looked around and asked. He ordered He Xiaoping to come over and gave us two choices. It's time for us to make a decision. Which choice should we choose? The temple was in silence. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor came aggressively. He brought 4 out of 8 Pillar of States, and there are still Grand General who crowns the army, Grand General of Cherishing Transformation, Duke Wei, and even a few first-ranking high officials among them. If we face them directly, we definitely can't win. High official Ma Lianshan said, Pardon my straightforwardness, Sex will definitely win the battle of the martial world, but Eternal Peace Empire is a level higher in fighting wars on the battlefield. In that case, why should we take our shortcoming to fight their strength? Why not take our strength to fight their shortcoming? Everyone nodded his head. Passion-parting Palace Master suddenly said, This reminds me of the battle 200 years ago. Back then there were a lot of strong practitioners of the battle technique school with a variety of cultivations. It was able to compete with the sword control school and the spell school. At that time the battle technique school fought the sword control school and the spell school to the death every day, and how brash were they then? But now, look at our battle technique school again. Where are the experts? Where have they gone? Everyone fell silent. The experts of the battle technique school had mostly died in a debate with Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. From then on, the battle technique school was ruined with a stumble. In the recent years, the battle technique school had already started to merge with other schools, and there were rarely people who purely cultivated battle techniques. In that debate, the battle technique school was crippled with just Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor alone. Passion-parting Palace Master said indifferently, What's the difference between the situation now and then? At that time the battle technique school thought they were the #1 in the world and would completely crush sword control school in this debate. Therefore many strong practitioners of the battle technique school went forth to the capital city to challenge Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. What happened next? She looked around. If we go according to the rules of the martial world with Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, won't we end up like them? The bronze masked man was silent for a moment before asking, What brilliant idea does Palace Master Chiu have? Passion-parting Palace Master raised her hand and replied, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor thinks we are going to fight him according to the rules of the martial world, but we actually won't follow the rules of the martial world. We will first give him a location, and when he reaches, we will all go forth and end this by killing him. Her palm sliced down as she said coldly, Eternal Peace Empire was merely a small country, and for them to be able to have what they have today, most of the effort lies on Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. He is already a legend that is revered by the civil and military officials in the imperial court. If he wants to rebel, he just needs to raise an arm and the emperor would have to give up his throne. If the emperor doesn't give up his throne, He will be slain and his entire family would be exterminated. If Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor dies, Eternal Peace Empire won't be hard to deal with when they have no leader. Therefore we must resort to unscrupulous means. We can't go by the rules of the martial world. This, Palace Master Chiu is right. All the sect masters in Luoguang Temple agreed. Only a few of them felt uncomfortable going against the rules of the martial world, but they didn't oppose it. Attacking Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor altogether, and the three elders ambushing Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor the previous time was two different matters. When the three elders ambushed Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor back then, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was situated in an army of 10,000 men, having countless strong practitioners beside him. Thus the three elders didn't break any rule of the martial world. Whereas this time they were actually tearing apart the rules of the martial world and trampling on it. With this action the rules will be broken, leaving behind a disaster that would go down in history. Spiritual Master Dao Quan shook his head secretly. They had brought the unruly fighting method of the imperial court to the martial world. I'm afraid we can't go back to the martial world in the past. Sunlight City, Qin Mu followed a set pattern and treated Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor again. When they reached Mountain City, he treated him once more. All the troops advanced together and had already reached the front of Daxiang, invading city and taking over the territory, sweeping everything in front of them. There were many bodies of water in the south, but there was no moat like surging river, therefore, it was hard for them to defend against Eternal Peace Empire's army. Qin Mu helped Eternal Peace Empire greatly by summoning Dutian Devil King to destroy Heaven Wave City, a strategic location built on such moat. However, he couldn't take credit for it. On the fifth day, Qin Mu and the rest came to Exceed City, and Exceed City had also been taken over. Just as they entered the city, they saw a beggar wearing ragged clothes that were covered in patches holding a broken bowl and supporting himself with a cane. When he came to them, Monk Yun Ke felt in his pocket to see if he had any spare change. Hu Linger took out a great abundance coin and handed it over to Yun Quebec. Yun Ke expressed his thanks and placed it in the bowl of the old beggar. That old beggar shook his bowl and the coin inside rattled as he grinned. You are all kind people, you will have many children and great prosperity. Imperial Preceptor, may I bother you to head over to Daxiang? In Daxiang City, the second choice, the heroes of this world will meet Imperial Preceptor there. We'll wait for your arrival. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor gave him a glance and said indifferently, why can't you guys wait a few more days? If you wait a few more days, my army will be able to descend on Dali and meet the so-called heroes of this world in Dali, throwing their bodies into the southern sea to feed the fishes, saving us the trouble to bury them. Isn't it better? That old beggar laughed out loud, and there were actually 7 continuous sounds of gates opening from his body. His aura rose dramatically and his cultivation was incomparably dense. His spirit was like a god that looked disdainfully at all living things. It was a spirit that didn't seem like he was only surviving because of people giving alms, and was like a god that was worshipped by all living things. Imperial Preceptor is heroic as usual. Daxiang City, I'll wait for your arrival. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly heard a voice. Hold it. The old beggar squatted down and turned his head back to look at Qin Mu with a puzzled face. Without a change in expression, Qin Mu said softly, Linger, take back the money. He is much richer than us. Hu Linger immediately went forward and took out that great abundance coin from the broken bowl. The old beggar immediately flew into fury. You have the face to take back the alms you have given to a beggar? You're impotent. Impotent. Smelly beggar scolding us? Hu Linger turned her head back and asked, Young master, what's impotent? Qin Mu said, Impotent means you can't bear any child. He's really scolding us. Hu Linger flew into a fury and spat at the old beggar's face. That old beggar didn't avoid it and just chuckled. Little fox, you're dead meat for provoking me. After he had finished, he broke through the air in an instant. Hu Linger spat. How dare you scold and curse me after scamming my money? You're impotent. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, You need to be more careful. That's Sect Master Chidayo of Beggar Sect. Beggar Sect is usually petty and proficient in evil arts. If no alms were given, they would create a ruckus in front of shops or use evil arts to harm people. After spoiling people's business, they will even scold you behind your back, and even steal other people's daughters and sons to sell. There is a beggar hall in Heavenly Devil cult which fought them quite a few times. Beggar hall only asked for food and did lesser evils, however. They were framed quite a lot by beggar sect. Qin Mu blinked his eyes and smiled. Imperial Preceptor, we're not much further from Daxiang and it's enough for us to send you here. We should be returning to Imperial College. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor replied expressionlessly. No, you must follow me to Daxiang. Qin Mu got a headache. When everyone had settled down, he went out by himself and came to a gambling den in ENGSUB City. He found the den owner and ordered, "Pass down my command. Let the 360 halls of our sacred cult come forth using their teleportation flags." Hold it! Si Yunxiang's voice came from behind Qin Mu. Qin Mu turned back to look and saw Si Yunxiang walking over. Her shyness in the past had disappeared with a trace as she said coldly, "Sacred Cult Master, if you do so, you will drag our sacred cult into danger as well. If our sacred cult has any mishap, who will be responsible?" Qin Mu turned his body around and said indifferently, "Saintess, I'm the cult master." Si Yunxiang smiled sweetly. "Saintess Si Yunxiang pays my respect to cult master." Her face turned cold. "If cult master lets our sacred cult help Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, no matter if Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor wins or loses, our sacred cult would lose all our reputation in the martial world. We will get ridiculed and viewed as an enemy by other sections. We will have no footing in this world." Qin Mu shook his head. "The sacred cult is already Heavenly Devil cult, so what reputation do we have? People will not give you a footing, we have to fight for it ourselves. This is a rare opportunity, and if the sacred cult doesn't partake, we will really have no footing." Si Yunxiang protested. "What if Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor lay his hand on our Heavenly Saint cult after he had dealt with all the sects in this world? Can you take responsibility for that?" Qin Mu took a glance at her. "I'll take responsibility." Si Yunxiang's expression changed again and she suddenly smiled lightly. "You're the cult master, so it's natural you make the decision." Si Yunxiang won't say anymore. "However, if Sacred Cult Master makes a wrong move and lets our sacred cult fall into danger, maybe Cult Master may be the second Sacred Cult Master that got killed by the Saintess." Qin Mu frowned. The Sacred Cult Master of Heavenly Devil was really a dangerous position which could be killed any moment because of a misconduct. Si Yunxiang said shyly, "The previous Cult Master died from being lecherous and the current Cult Master got beaten to death alive by the Saintess. The reputation of both of them doesn't seem nice." Qin Mu shook his head and waved his hand. "Saintess, you may fall back. Pass down my command. All 360 hall masters to come forth at once using teleportation flags. Also invite the 2 guardians as well." The gambling den owner bowed. "As cult master command." Qin Mu walked out of the gambling den and Si Yunxiang was standing outside it. When she saw him walking out, she snickered. "Beaten to death alive." Qin Mu stared at her and walked forward. "Are you following or not?" Si Yunxiang caught up with him and rolled her eyes. "Does Cult Master want to place great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures in the cult first, in case it goes missing after Cult Master dies?" Qin Mu stopped in his footsteps and turned around, speaking in a serious tone. "Sister, you aren't my opponent. If my judgment is wrong, your coming to kill me will only result in being killed by me. You." He used Vital Qi to draw a triangle in the sky, and then to draw a straight line in the middle. "This is you." He then drew another straight line. "This is me. No matter how wide your angle is, your line won't be as long as mine." The sword case behind Si Yunxiang stirred and tinkling noises came from inside as she smiled sweetly. "How will we know if we never try?" Qin Mu placed both his hands behind his back as he walked forward. "There's no need to try. On the same realm, no one is my opponent, not you, not even Imperial Preceptor." He stopped in his footsteps and looked towards the sky with a hint of loneliness. "I'm the Overlord body." Qin Mu lowered his head and sighed. "The only Overlord body in the world." Si Yunxiang was stunned and wanted to make a move, yet she was shaken by his imposing manner. It was an aura of loneliness from being invincible. Overlord body? What kind of constitution is that? Is it stronger than the 4 great spirit bodies? She thought to herself, could Patriarch choose him as the cult master and not me because he is the Overlord body? Si Yunxiang composed herself and raised her eyes to look at Qin Mu, who had walked far away. "I will not be weaker than the so-called Overlord body. The women of our sea family are natural-born cult master killers. If the saintless of the previous generation could kill the previous cult master, I can do it too. They arrived at Flood County the next day, and Flood County had already been taken over for 2 days. When a soldier saw Imperial Preceptor, he immediately reported, "Imperial Preceptor, there are many people carrying flags that had arrived in the city." People carrying flags? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, and mumbled for a moment while looking at Qin Mu. He then said, "Ignore them. How many of them are there exactly?" "About a dozen. They all wear bamboo hats to cover their faces, and they have different weapons on them that are wrapped tightly with a cloth. They don't look like good guys. You may fall back." On the 3rd day, they came to Clear River County, and there were also many people carrying flags that came to Clear River County. There were about 50 to 60 people, much more than yesterday. On the 4th day in Hidden Fog City, a few hundred people carrying flags appeared in the city. Qin Mu didn't explain where these people came from and why they came here, and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor didn't ask about it. On the 5th day, they walked out of the official's manor and prepared to head to Daxiang. Just as they walked out of the yamen and came onto the street, they saw a weird person, who was wearing a bamboo hat and carrying weapons wrapped with cloth, stand up from the gate of the yamen, following behind them. Another 2 steps forwards, another person walked out from the alley beside them. The person was also wearing a bamboo hat which was pushed down. On his hand was a weapon wrapped with a cloth. Another burly man wearing a bamboo hat beside the street also stood up and carried a cloth sack to follow them. Before they even walked out of Hidden Fog City, there were a few hundred weird people who were dressed similarly following them. There were males, females, young and old. Chan Wanyun, Yu Qinghong and the rest turned back to have a look and felt uneasy. All these people had their bamboo hats pushed down and followed at a suitable distance behind. They didn't want to reveal their faces, and they didn't know what they planned to do. Could it be those people carrying the flags? Where are their flags? Yun Ke muttered. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor still remained indifferent, and he paid no attention to the few hundred people behind him. When they reached Hidden Fog City, there was an arbor not far from the city gate. There were 2 elders selling tea under the arbor, 1 male and 1 female. When they walked over, those 2 elders raised their heads and greeted. "Dear guests, how about a cup of tea?" Monk Yun Ke muttered. "Why should we drink the tea when we just took to the road?" Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, "I'm thirsty." Once he had said that, he sat down in the arbor and asked for a cup of tea. Qin Mu also sat down. Those 2 elders also sat down respectively. 4 people sat at 4 sides of the table, each having a cup of tea in front of him. Chan Wanyun, Yu Qinghong and the rest also wanted to go forward, but they noticed that they remained at the same spot no matter how much they moved forward. That arbor was very close to them, yet after dozens of steps, they still remained where they were. Everyone was astonished and sprinted towards the arbor in a hurry. Their speed was extremely fast, yet they were always yards away from the arbor. This arbor that looked close to them seemed to be 1,000 miles away. After a moment, Qin Mu and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor finished their tea, and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor stood up to bow. That old man and old woman also stood up to bow. The 2 of them walked out of the arbor, and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, "Let us go to Daxiang." Everyone had a bewildered expression, but they still followed them. Yu Qinghong turned back to have a look and saw the few hundred weird people wearing bamboo hats didn't follow them. They had instead sat outside the arbor, each having a cup of tea in the hand and drinking it silently. It was a weird sight. "What a bunch of weird people," Hu Linger said. Si Yunxiang came to Qin Mu's side and asked in a low voice, "Is it done?" Qin Mu nodded his head. "You will know then." When they came to the outskirts of Daxiang City, there were barracks filled in the open space. Military camps were set up everywhere, and Duke Wei, Grand General who crowns the army, Grand General of Cherishing Transformation were both here. They didn't invade Daxiang immediately. Daxiang was a strategic town of the southern borders where the rebel army from all over the world would gather, amassing thousands of soldiers and cavalries. There were also disciples from all sorts of sects rushing to this place in an endless stream, waiting for their moment to strike. If a war broke out, this would definitely go down as an epic and grand war in history. On the journey, Qin Mu saw golden-armored strongmen pushing huge cloud carts and practicing attacking the city. These golden armored strongmen were experts that cultivated battle techniques and specially strengthened their corporeal bodies. Their bodies could swell up dozens to hundreds of times, turning them into giants. They were clad with armor formed from mysterious copper and mysterious gold. Just the thickness of the armor alone was half a feet. When these giants were practicing to attack the city, there were chains wrapped around their bodies and they had to carry shields as they pushed the cloud carts. Cloud carts were very complicated, and other than the huge iron hammers smashing the city gate, there were also flying cart ladders which could stretch over dozens of yards upwards. The ladders would lean against the city wall, allowing soldiers to climb up the city walls. Other than this, there were also soldiers executing formation diagrams, laying them out to allow the soldiers to stand on them, practicing their formation. There were also cavalries riding huge birds that dived down under the command of the generals. 10 over thousands of sword lights shot down, and with one swoop, over a hectare of land were filled with flying swords. After the cavalries had flown past, the flying swords whooshed up from the ground and flew one after another into the sword cases on their back. The flying cavalries came and went like wind and like lightning, making people unable to guard. There was not only a troop of cavalry, there were dozens of flying cavalries. The huge flying cavalries utilized the beehive tactics and pack-of-wolf tactics. Therefore, if the land troops were to meet the flying cavalries, it was simply a devastating blow. If they encountered strong enemies, the flying cavalries could execute the kite tactics to hang the enemies to death. Other than the flying cavalries, there were also flying ships. This time, Duke Wei and Grand General who crowns the army had mobilized several hundred ships, and each ship could carry 1,000 people, which means a huge army of a few 100,000 was mobilized. Imperial Preceptor's reform has indeed turned Eternal Peace Empire's army into an invincible army. If our heavenly devil cult was to receive such an attack, we will definitely be wiped out, Qin Mu thought to himself. When they came to the camp, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had a few words with Duke Wei, Grand General who crowns the army, and Grand General of Cherishing Transformation, before leading Qin Mu and the rest towards Daxiang City. There were flags of all kinds of sects hanging on Daxiang City. There were even some flags of countries that were eradicated. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor took a look and shook his head. If this old generation isn't completely destroyed, how will we become great? They could keep coming back from the ashes and make a comeback. Blood must flow in a revolution and millions of heads will roll. Qin Mu asked, Imperial Preceptor, is it ready? It's ready. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor raised his head, and the city gate opened wide. 2 rows of people walked over and lined up to the left and right of the city gate. The vital chi behind them turned into apparitions of God and devils, strong practitioners of celestial being realm. Qin Mu composed himself. The strong practitioners of celestial being realm could already show apparitions of gods and devils. These 2 groups of strong practitioners of celestial being realm had already hit 60 to 70 people. The scene still isn't big enough. Yu Qinghong sighed and smiled. To test the scholars in this world, just the examination in Hall of Azure Yang of our Imperial College alone would mobilize 99 strong practitioners of celestial being realm to test the scholars. For the rebels to only have such little strong practitioners of celestial being realm, it's not even enough for our Imperial College to kill. The dozens of strong practitioners of celestial being realm looked down towards their hearts and ignored her words. When they walked into the city gate, they saw 2 rows of strong practitioners of celestial being realm lined up on both sides of the long street. There was a person every 10 steps all the way to the center of the city. The end almost couldn't be seen, and there was probably over 1,000 of them. Yu Qinghong's heart trembled violently and didn't dare to say a word. Qin Mu was still quite composed. Heavenly Devil Cult also had a few hundred of strong practitioners of celestial being realm, therefore, there was nothing for him to be surprised of. Not only the sects are involved in this revolt, even some countries that were already eradicated are involved. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor continued indifferently. Back then, to win the heart of people, I didn't kill every single one of the strong practitioners from these countries, which allowed them to rebel again. Other than the sects and countries, there are also some reputable families, and the riots from these reputable families can't be underestimated. Qin Mu made some calculations. Above Celestial Being Realm was Life and Death Realm, and above Life and Death Realm was Divine Bridge Realm. Since there were so many strong practitioners of Celestial Being Realm, This meant the numbers of strong practitioners of life and death realm weren't low, and there will at least be 100 of them. Meanwhile, there would probably be over a dozen strong practitioners of divine bridge realm, over a dozen people of the cult master level, plus the strong practitioners from the hidden sacred grounds like Little Jade Capital. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was now literally sending his head to them to chop off. As for Qin Mu and the rest, they could just chop their heads off first and hang them around their waists. The strong practitioners on both sides of the path were solemn and made no sound. Only the footsteps of Qin Mu and the rest could be heard. Other than the divine arts practitioners of the rebels that were in the city, there was already no one else here. Not only that, there were actually no buildings in Daxiang City. All the buildings were razed to the ground, and even the foundations of the buildings were removed. The city was bare and only tens of thousands of soldiers were inside. They were in their formations and they were all silent as well, not saying a word as they looked at them. Walking under the gaze of tens of thousands of divine arts practitioners was extremely nerve-wracking. Even Chen Wanyun, who was used to war, was trembling, unable to control himself. Qin Mu had seen God before and even peed on the sculpture of God, so he was still undisturbed. He felt the pressure, but he didn't lose his composure. The center of the city had also been renovated. The City Lord Manor had vanished without a trace, and replacing it was a high platform that had a few thousand steps. The platform was dozens of yards away from the ground and was even taller than the city tower, looking like a small mountain. Qin Mu walked forward and his heart trembled slightly. The platform didn't look like a small mountain, it was a mountain. Some moved the entire mountain and placed it on the original spot of the City Lord Manor before sculpting it into the shape it was now. When they came to the bottom of the steps, they slowly walked up at a steady pace. Finally, when they came to the top of the mountain, they discovered the mountain peak had already been flattened. Majestic apparitions of gods and devils stood towering, yet all the masters of the sects were nowhere to be seen. Qin Mu looked closely and saw these sect masters were either standing on the palm of the gods and devils apparition, or they were sitting in the heart of the gods and devils' brows. None of them were touching the floor. They were all high up in the sky, giving Qin Mu and the rest an immense pressure. These existences of the cult master level were simply too strong. There was a beautiful woman standing on the fingertips of a god's apparition, looking down at Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor from above. She said with a soft voice, "The number one man under gods, the Imperial Preceptor of the current dynasty, you actually didn't bring any helpers?" This apparition of God had the appearance of a Taoist. The apparition had a height of 300 yards and the eyes were snow white as if they were made up of white-colored light. A huge snake coiled around his body and a black turtle was under his feet. A breeze blew over and the pennant behind his back fluttered in the light breeze. Si Yunxiang saw this sight and her heart leaped slightly. The god that her vital qi had transformed into has been refined into a solid form, a realm which is near to God. Qin Mu wasn't too clear in this area and his heart wavered. He then asked, "Sister, if someone doesn't have his four limbs but when using the third eye to look at him, he is perfectly able and looks like an imposing and matchless god, giving off divine light that blinds people. How is this realm compared to this woman's realm?" Si Yunxiang also didn't have much understanding of this and didn't reply. Suddenly, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor turned his head around and an uncontrollable aura burst forth. His desire for battle overflowed from his body. "You have seen such a person?" Qin Mu was shocked by the sudden outburst of his battle desire and said, "It's my elder." The corners of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's eyes twitched. "Your elder again? You seem to have a lot of elders." Qin Mu blushed. "It's a little much, there's just 9 of them." 9 of such elders? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was astonished. Were those 9 people like Mute? If so, the origin of this heavenly devil cult master was a little terrifying. There are still 9 people who are like me, my path won't be lonely. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor gave a gratified smile. "I thought there was no one else other than me who had walked up to this step. Now my heart suddenly feels calm." Qin Mu looked at him curiously and suddenly wondered if he would be beaten to death if he used Green Heaven's eyes to look at Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor now. He really wanted to see if Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was the same existence as Village Chief. However, he couldn't see through Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. He couldn't see through this person's cultivation, nor could he see through his nature. There were many contradicting points to this person. If he used Green Heaven's eyes to look at him, he might flare up. Imperial Preceptor, Palace Master is talking to you. Why aren't you replying? Qin Mu looked towards the source of the voice and saw this person that had spoken walking down the platform. He wore a bronze mask which was very unique. It had exaggerated facial features which included long and wide ears, nose like an eagle's beak, a huge mouth, two pillar-like eyes, wide eyebrows, a hole on the forehead which seemed to be prepared for another eye. Once Qin Mu saw the forehead under that mask, and there was indeed an eye there. There was an eye between this person's brows. What is this technique? He was slightly stunned. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor looked over to that bronze-masked man, and his gaze went past him, landing on Passion Parting Palace Master Qiu Jie. Palace Master Qiu of Passion Parting Palace. Your technique of Secrets of Hatred Parting Heavenly Sword is equivalent to a sword art handed down by a god. His gaze landed on the next person. Chariot Castle Lord Che Zhengli, Jade Castle Lord Yu Qingsheng, Black Castle Lord Li Fei. Castle Lord Che's technique is Heaven's Law Mysterious Devil Seal, the technique to seal the devil path of Dao sect. Jade Castle Lord's technique is 5 Insects Dragon Transformation Technique, which raises venomous insects into dragons. Castle Lord Li, you refine poison, but for what your technique is, I'm not clear. Castle Lord Li chuckled. There are still techniques that Imperial Preceptor doesn't know? My technique is called Poison Transforming 3 Immortals Mystery Technique, which is good at transforming poison into power. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's gaze landed on another person. Spiritual Master Dao Quan always treats illnesses and saves people, so why have you joined the rebels too? Over 10 years ago, due to the flood from Surging River, plague ran amok and an epidemic spread throughout the south. Spiritual Master treated the people and gave free medicines, earning a good reputation in the whole world. I had wanted to invite you to be an official in Imperial College, but you declined, thus you were only conferred the title of Spiritual Master. Spiritual Master Dao Quan said solemnly, we can't work together when our paths are different. Imperial Preceptor, I had to decline your offer back then because I could see that you and I were people on different paths. You are too ruthless, wanting to eliminate all sects in the world, so I have no choice but to stop you. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor fell silent. I eliminate all sects in the world to be able to treat more people. Have you seen how I've been doing? Spiritual Master Dao Quan said. You are doing very well. Originally, there were few apothecaries in this world, but now they're like the hairs on a cow. Even flying ships are assigned with apothecaries and medicine children, making it hard for the plague to go on a rampage. However, over these years, all physicians Imperial College taught are quacks and none of them can be considered as divine physicians. You can't refute this point. Looks like your path is really different from mine. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor looked at another row of people and said, High Official Ma Lianshan, Lord Ma. I dare not, Ma Lianshan said solemnly. Imperial Preceptor, my official position was recommended by you, but I also have my sect. I'm from Zhongnan Mountains, cultivating Nanming 5 Li Sword Classics. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, I had asked His Majesty to appoint you as an official because you are upright and impartial. Furthermore, you're good at leading troops as well. I had thought you would toss away the sectarian bias, but you became a rebel, inflicting pain on me. As an official, you did good and the people always had extremely good words about you. Ma Lianshan shook his head. How could I be the only good official that had rebel? Imperial Preceptor, you should reflect upon your mistakes. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said with a stupefied face. The rotten branch must be chopped off at once. If the hearts of people wallow in the old and rot away, how can we reform? If we only start a revolution and don't reform the lives of people rotting away, it would be hard for the world to be at peace. Even though you're a good man, you're in my way. He looked at other people and said, Beggar Sects Chi Dio Sect Master Chi 100 Poor Mystery Technique. Heavenly Stars Catcher Sect, Sect Master Luo Xinghe. Heavenly Stars Catcher's Mystery Technique. Great Strength Monasteries Venerable Zhikong. Formation Existence Destruction Emptiness for Incantations Madra. Great Padalaka Monasteries Venerable Hong Fa. Buddhism Life Bodhi Technique. South Sea Vrta Monasteries Venerable Hui Yin. Vajra Unbeatable Technique. There's also Sakyamuni Xiankong, who was originally the ruler of Xiankong country, ruler of Nanjing country, Duan Yin, ruler of Shifan country, Nunu Huer, as well as the 3 seniors of the old generation. His gaze landed on the 2 old men and 1 old woman. The 3 of you are from the old generation and are already ancient, about 700 to 800 years old today, am I right? After living for over 800 years, you have reached the end of one's lifespan. May I know how many years the 3 of you have left? The short, skinny and black elder smiled. I'm Wanderer Shanai, people call me Wandererly. I still have 16 years left. Actually, I can't be considered as a wanderer. Chiyun country, the small country that Imperial Preceptor eradicated, was the country I had founded. I'm true Lord Tian. The old woman grinned. I love to breed insects, which Imperial Preceptor should have seen before. Castle Lord Yu of 3 Wonders Castle is my son. The plump elder said. I don't have such a huge background like them. I'm teacher poor, don't look down on me for being so fat since I got broke from eating. We cultivate the poor logic technique, so the poorer we are, the more logical we are. Teacher poor is joking around. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor asked solemnly. When you see things from the angle of a poor person, you should work to seek knowledge, to attain it by investigating things. I know this logic. But you're a teacher, so why are you rebelling against me? Teacher poor shook his head. When you cultivate a good character when you are poor, the world will become like you when you rise to power. Imperial Preceptor, there's no benefit to the world when your power is too great. I rebel not for my own personal gain, but like them, I did it for Eternal Peace Empire. Based on your overwhelming power, we can still get rid of you now. But if it were a few years later, you would have already become the Emperor. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor straightened up on the peak of the mountain, and his indifferent voice spread out in all direction. Who else is against me? Voices instantly sounded out one after another in Daxiang City. I am. Liao Yingji of Heavenly Immortal Sect dares to rebel against Imperial Preceptor. Glorious Grand Master Qiu Jiming dares to rebel against Imperial Preceptor. Wuling Marquis Shanmu dares to rebel against Imperial Preceptor. Duhu Manor Adjutant Qing Mingyue dares to rebel against Imperial Preceptor. Wuying Country Magistrate Chan Yao dares to rebel against Imperial Preceptor. Voices sounded out from Daxiang City, and all of them belonged to great experts of life and death realm and celestial being realm. When one finished speaking, another voice would take its place without end. The declarations grew greater and greater in power, gripping people's hearts and firing them up. The blood of the bronze-masked man was also racing when he said in a resounding voice, Imperial Preceptor, do you see this? How unfavorable you are. With all the people in the world wanting to kill you, what face do you have to continue living? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was expressionless and said indifferently, all the people in the world? A mere few 100,000 people in this city are fit to be called all the people in the world? They're just an insignificant bunch who simply need to be eradicated. Only when all of you are dead can the world finally be at peace. In that case, the end will only come when one side is entirely wiped out, the bronze-masked man said. Heavenly Prison Seal has already been laid down on this mountain, clearing an area of 50 hectares. There's no need to worry about injuring the soldiers outside by clashing here. This time, we won't be talking about the righteousness and justice of the martial world, nor the rules of the martial world. Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief and smiled at Si Yunxiang. In that case, I can be at ease. Monk Yun Ke had an ashen expression as he stuttered. What do you mean at ease? We are trapped in the seal and will be the first to die from the tremors. Do you still remember Heaven Wave City? This battle will definitely be several times more terrifying than the one in Heaven Wave City. Yu Qinghong and the rest were also pale-faced. Only a portion of Dutian Devil King's magic power had descended in the Battle of Heaven Wave City, fighting against Dragon Rider Sect Master and another strong practitioner of the Cult Master level. Yet the scale of the destruction had been unimaginable. Even the Dragon Qilin, which was extremely strong, couldn't withstand that kind of blow. If a huge battle broke out here, the destruction would be several times greater. However, the area of 50 hectares was all sealed, which meant that the pulses formed by the strong practitioners fighting here would rebound to and fro, stirring things up. When that time came, even the Dragon Qilin would become minced meat. At this moment, huge flags suddenly fluttered out of the city and extended forever into the distance. stretching over dozens of miles. The bronze-masked man and the others who were standing high up sported great change in expression when they looked over. The huge flags that were dozens of yards long fluttered upwards and covered the enemy camp. Hidden beneath them were the cavalry and countless soldiers. The bronze-masked man was about to shout for them to take caution when the huge flag suddenly rolled up and 360 huge flags appeared in the city. Weird people that were wearing bamboo hats and carrying cloth sacks suddenly waved them, and the Eternal Peace Empire's army that numbered in tens of thousands suddenly appeared in Daxiang City. It was only at this moment that the voice of the bronze-masked man rang out, "On guard!" However, it was already too late. When the 360 weird people rolled up their huge flags, creatures with ferocious faces appeared. They were holding weapons, and their murderous intent flowed into the sky. Under the flags, the golden-armored giants appeared together with cloud chariots. On the aft of the huge flying ships, bronze beasts had already started to spew blazing flames while huge birds flapped their wings and raised up gales. By the time the huge flags completely rolled up and became small, the sounds of slaughter had already begun. Sharp swords came out from their sheaths, their ringing mingling with world-shaking roars. This moment seemed to pass by extremely slow, so slow that the transformation of every person's expression could be seen, from ferocious to malevolent, from blank to terrified. Flying swords burst forth with blood light as they sliced through human bodies, shedding blood in the air. There was also a peculiar beauty to the instant when a head was separated from the neck. Elephant transformation. A bellow rang out and broke the moment when time seemed to have frozen. An officer in the infantry shouted out and thousands of foot soldiers bellowed. Their bodies swayed as they transformed into elephant-headed giants, rushing towards the rebel army and breaking them up. The flying cavalry in the meantime had soared into the sky and now dived downwards, shooting countless flying swords like rain. Fire bottle gourds. On the flying ships, an order was given, and the soldiers there took out red bottle gourds that were half the height of a human. When they pulled out the corks, raging true fire instantly spewed down from the flying ships, burning the guards on the city walls, turning countless of people into flaming humans. Boom! A troop of golden-armored strong men pushed the cloud chariots and trampled countless soldiers on their way as they ruthlessly smashed the city walls, shattering them, and flaming humans fell down from above. Outside the walls, Grand General who crowns the army and Grand General of Cherishing Transformation raised their spear and halberd high, pointing them towards Daxiang City. Behind them, the uncountable Eternal Peace Army roared and rushed forth both on the ground and in the sky like a flood. The sight in the city was bone-chilling. Before the insect army of Three Wonders Castle could be deployed, they were drowned by a sea of fire and sword, disintegrating into ashes. The insect army of Three Wonders Castle was extremely powerful, but because it was caught by surprise, both the humans and insects were burned to death. The female army of Passion Parting Palace was also extremely powerful, but they received a devastating blow in as well. Countless sharp swords came shooting down from the sky, piercing through their bodies. With thousands of holes, they died while still standing. By the time their bodies collapsed, the sharp swords that had pierced through them had already returned back to the sword cases worn by the cavalry on their back. The entire rebel army and all the disciples from each and every sect didn't have the time to react before they were scattered by the infantry, forcing them to fight for themselves. However, no matter how high their cultivation was, their heads were instantly severed when they got surrounded by the formations of Eternal Peace Empire soldiers. The battle power of a sect disciple surpassed that of a soldier by a lot, but their teamwork was lousy, so they were scattered with just one charge. Of course, there were people among the rebel army who were trained to work together, but they had been caught off guard. Once the army scattered, it was too late to do anything. This was definitely a massacre, and it had been achieved by the surprise attack under the teleportation flags of Heavenly Devil Cult. For those who were faced with such a thing, there was only one end: a complete obliteration. On the mountain, the bronze-masked man was trembling. Two choices. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor gave them two choices. One was to be raised by Eternal Peace Empire's army. It would push them to the South Sea and kill them to the last person, which was the rule of the Empire. The other choice was to follow the rule of the martial world, challenge Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, and fight to the death. They had always thought they would have to choose between these two choices and never expected to face both of them at the same time. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor wanted to beat them to death, as well as eradicate the rebel army. When did Heavenly Devil Cult start to rely on the Imperial Court? Passion-Parting Palace Master shouted out. When has the supreme sacred ground of the Devil Path become the dogs of the Imperial Court? Secrets of Hatred Parting Heavenly Sword of Passion-Parting Palace required the inner heart to be void of emotion. To have no love, hatred, passion, and enmity in order to reach the highest frame of mind in the sword skill. Only when the heart had no foreign objects in itself could it reflect others like a clear mirror, flawlessly. However, when Passion-Parting Palace Master Chodie saw her disciples getting massacred, her frame of mind was disrupted. This was no small matter. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor noticed it, and the vital chi on his fingertips transformed into a sword light. It expanded exponentially and reached her throat in an instant. It wasn't only the heart of Passion-Parting Palace Master in disorder, but the hearts of all others as well. When Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had made a move on Passion-Parting Palace Master, no one managed to intervene. "We are going to die." This thought appeared in the hearts of Chan Wanyun and the others. This mountain was sealed off as part of the 50 hectares of Heavenly Prison Seal, so the pulses wouldn't travel out and only rebound to and fro. The moment Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor clashed with them, they would be trampled into smithereens. Before Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor made his move, a huge flag appeared in front of Qin Mu and his companions, covering their bodies. With a jolt, the flag vanished along with the people and the dragon Qilin. The next moment, Qin Mu and the rest appeared at the bottom of the mountain. Chan Wanyun Yun Ke and Yu Qinghong looked at the weird person beside them who was wearing the bamboo hat. He was currently unfurling the huge flag again. A few hundred weird people surrounded this mountain in a circle as their huge flags fluttered, covering the entire mountain. An ancient voice sounded out, "Go!" Swoosh! The several hundred flags fluttered, and when they floated by, the mountain beneath them disappeared along with those cult master-level existences, including Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. Only a piece of white land remained where the mountain had been, and on the ground was the crushed city lord's manor. Chan Wanyun Yun Ke and the rest were bewildered when they saw those weird people raising their flags again, covering their group. Before Chan Wanyun and the rest could come back to their senses, a huge flag enclosed upon them. They only felt the world whirling before their feet were once again firmly planted on the ground. It was then that they saw that they had already left the battle in Daxiang City and come to a mountain peak nearby. This mountain peak was extremely high up, and a gale was whooshing about, rustling their clothes. Beside them stood a few hundred weird people wearing bamboo hats. Chan Wanyun and the rest suppressed the shock in their hearts and looked at one another. They are strong practitioners of Heavenly Devil Cult. What are they going to do by kidnapping us? The incomparably mysterious Heavenly Devil Cult was the #1 sacred ground of the Devil Path. This Devil Path sacred ground always conducted itself secretly, and the Imperial Court of Eternal Peace Empire had investigated it many times, yet they had never discovered a lot of information that could be deemed useful. For Heavenly Devil Cult to help Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor this time, and even bring their little group out of the place where Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was battling, it definitely had something planned. Suddenly the weird people took down the bamboo hats from the top of their heads and gave the disciples greeting, bowing towards them while saying in unison, "Subordinates pay respects to sacred cult master and saintess." Chan Wanyun and the others were at a loss and felt unease in their hearts when they looked at these strong practitioners of Heavenly Devil Cult bowing and performing the disciples' greeting. Monk Yun Ke immediately closed his eyes and shouted, "I saw nothing. I didn't see your faces, don't silence me." At this moment a familiar voice sounded out beside them. "Rise, no need for formalities." "Thank you, sacred cult master." The weird people stood up and Chan Wanyun and the rest looked at the person who had spoken with a face of astonishment. The first abandoned person to enter Imperial College, the first Imperial Academician of Imperial College, Qin Mu, was the Devil Cult Master of Heavenly Devil Cult? Qin Mu's face was gentle as he smiled at them. If Academician is the Devil Cult Master, who's the Devil Saintess? Yu Qinghong asked with a trembling voice. Si Yunxiang smiled shyly at her, and Yu Qinghong's hair stood up on end. The directorate of our Imperial College's Hall of Hidden Light, Directorate Jian Sansheng, even Directorate Chen Yunting of Hall of Array Element. Chan Wanyun saw Sword Hall Master and Formation Hall Master, which made his heart sink as he muttered, "We're definitely going to die, we're dead." Monk Yun K shouted angrily, "You're definitely going to die after seeing their true faces, but why did you have to say their names as well?" I closed my eyes, but now that I've heard their names, I'm going to die too. Sword Hall Master took a glance at the four of them and asked, "Sacred Cult Master, now that they have seen our true faces, should we silence them to be safe?" Monk Yun K immediately opened his eyes and looked towards Qin Mu with a smile. "Academician Sacred Cult Master, were classmates and you even beat me before, have you forgotten about that? Sister Fox, remember how much money I've given you. Can you put in a word for me?" Hu Linger tilted her head and wagged her tail to show that she was helpless. Qin Mu consoled, "Don't worry, Scholar Yun, everyone be at ease too, there's still me, I'm here." He turned his head and told Sword Hall Master, "Sword Hall, they are all my classmates in Imperial College. You can ask them if they are willing to join our sacred cult, and if they aren't, you can bury them in this place of verdant hills and limpid water." Qin Mu then turned his head around to console his friends. Don't worry, I'll settle this." Monk Yun K was scared witless and his hair stood up on end. Luckily he was bald, or else even those on his head would have risen up. Qin Mu turned back around and said, "Sword Hall, when you kill them later, don't do it in front of me. Wanyun Qinghong, don't worry as well, we aren't ruthless villains like the others of the Devil Path. Put your heart back into your tummy, you're going to be fine. Draw your sword faster and minimize their pain." "I've heard you," Monk Yun K shouted. "Sword Hall, don't come over. I'm already part of the Devil Cult." "Bah, part of the Sacred Cult." Yu Qinghong and Chan Wanyun looked at each other, and Yu Qinghong asked in a low voice, "Big brother, what should we do?" Chan Wanyun hesitated for a moment before saying, "For Heavenly Devil Cult to help Imperial Preceptor this time. It means that Heavenly Devil Cult is part of Imperial Court. There's nothing to lose by joining Heavenly Devil Cult. And if we don't join..." The corners of his eyes twitched, but he didn't say anything else. Yu Qinghong let out a sigh of relief. "There's nothing to lose in joining Heavenly Devil Cult. We'll join." Since she had said so, the wolf slave naturally had nothing else to say. Yu Qinghong blinked her eyes innocently toward Si Yunxiang. "Saintess, if we did not join the sacred cult, you guys would definitely have not laid your hands on us, right?" Si Yunxiang gave a soft laugh. "Cult Master has a kind heart, he was just joking with you guys." Monk Yun K let out a sigh of relief and muttered, "Little Monk knew it was a joke. Academician, you were joking earlier, right?" "Academician?" Qin Mu chuckled and didn't say anything. Yun K turned ashen-faced. Qin Mu came to the cliff and looked towards another mountain, which was several miles away from here. That place was where Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and the dozen Cult Master level existences were fighting. The heavenly prison seal set up by the bronze-masked man and the rest had already been pierced through, holes appearing one after another. There was a terrifying storm coming out from those holes, creating violent gales that blew away pieces of the forest, sweeping countless trees into the sky and shredding them into pieces. The battle on the mountaintop was too terrifying. It was a life and death struggle between existences of Cult Master level. Despite them being so far away and a heavenly prison seal between them, a terrifying sensation could still be felt. Whoosh! Another gale swept by, and only now did Chan Wanyun and the rest realize why the wind was so strong when they had landed on the mountain just now. The gales here were actually created by the battle that was several miles away. The power of the wind grew stronger and stronger, bending the trees on the surrounding mountains. The gusts came one after another. The moment one passed, another had already arrived from another direction. The trees that had snapped back were once again bent, while others broke in half. The mountain should have already been shattered. Qin Mu saw the ground on which those terrifying existences were clashing becoming lower and lower, until it was basically as flat as the plains. Being so far away, Qin Mu could see the battle by using Green Heaven's eyes, but not too clearly. This was because the speed of those people clashing against each other was too fast, which made it hard for Green Heaven's eyes to capture traces of their movements, not to mention their moves. Qin Mu could only use the trails left behind by their movements to determine how many people were still on the mountain. Another existence of the Cult Master level has fallen. Qin Mu's heart trembled slightly. Yu Qinghong looked around and saw the strong practitioners of Heavenly Devil Cult were all standing on the mountain peak silently, observing the battle from afar. They had no intention to go forth and help out, which puzzled her. "Aren't you guys going to help?" "Nope," Qin Mu explained. "Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor can settle this alone." The sneak attack of the 3 old monsters from the old generation could injure Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, who was in an army of 10,000 men. If it was Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor doing the sneak attack, there would hardly be anyone that could be his match. How our Heavenly Devil Cult could help him was to create the chance for him to make his move. The instant the sect masters lost their spirit, it was the best moment for Imperial Preceptor to launch a sneak attack. No matter if it was the #1 cult of the Devil Path helping Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, or if it was Heavenly Devil Cult using teleportation flags to transfer the Eternal Peace Army, they were able to shake the hearts of all the cult master level existences by massacring all the sect's disciples, swaying their minds and throwing them into disorder. Even though their hearts weren't in disorder for too long, this was akin to death in front of an existence like Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. Even though people with cult master level of power were usually great experts of Divine Bridge Realm, there were those who were weak and those who were strong in Divine Bridge Realm. It was just like what Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had said. He was someone who had no weakness in every realm. No matter how wide another's angles were, their line would never be as long as his straight line. His cultivation surpassed that of others and his abilities also surpassed those of others. Under the circumstances of a sneak attack, there was basically no one who could be his match or even receive one move from him. This was just like in Heaven Wave City when Duqian Devil King was fighting against Mute. Duqian Devil King had been slain with one attack, and that one attack had been a sneak attack. Qin Mu reckoned that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor could take advantage of the instant when those strong practitioners lost spirit to get rid of 4 of them. As for how many he could injure, that would depend on Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's own ability. However, no matter how brilliant this battle was in exhibiting the splendor of the strongest powers in this world, there weren't many who could read the situation there. With only the few hundred people present, probably only the left and right guardians could be able to grasp each and every movement of the people present on the battlefield. Even if it were the hall masters of the 360 halls, not many of them could see the moves clearly. Qin Mu once again fixed his eyes on the battlefield, yet he was still unable to see the situation there. He could only see the afterimages created by the fast-moving bodies as well as the lights given off by the divine arts and sword skills. Every once in a while, a trail of light would vanish, representing the death of a strong practitioner. Now there were only 8 figures left. Other than Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, there are still 7 people. Qin Mu's gaze flickered. The 7 people should be the ones that had the strongest abilities, but who were the 7 that were still alive? He could see the godlike rays from the figures moving, but he couldn't see who was who. If I cannot see the situation of the battle, aren't I losing out on a huge opportunity? I wonder if I can awaken my Cyan Heaven's eyes. Qin Mu mobilized his vital qi, and more of it entered his eyes as he tried to construct the formation markings of Cyan Heaven's eyes. There were already 3 layers of pupils in his eyes. The first layer was his own pupils, the second layer was the pupils formed by Heaven's eyes, while the third layer was the pupils formed by Green Heaven's eyes. If he could form Cyan Heaven's eyes, they would become the 4th layer and allow him to see even more stuff. Just as he was directing his vital qi into his eyes, he felt a trace of something else entering his eyes along with his vital qi. Qin Mu was stunned and suddenly felt that everything on the battlefield had become incomparably clear. He shook his head and looked at the battlefield again. It was still incomparably clear. And he hadn't even formed the formation markings of Cyan Heaven's eyes. There's someone else's eyes in my eyes. Qin Mu felt a bone-chilling cold go down his spine. He could now see every movement and action that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was making, every layer of divine arts and sword skills, and even the structure of them. Every action and expression was in his eyes. This wasn't what his eyes could see but what someone else's eyes could see. Or it could be said that it was someone else borrowing his eyes to observe the battle. Who was the one borrowing his eyes to observe the battle? He suddenly remembered that when he had summoned Duqian Devil King in Heaven Wave City, Duqian Devil King's consciousness and magic power had used his body as a medium to enter the Devil God's sculpture, blowing open the heart of his brows. Sparks had flowed out from the heart of his brows, surging into the devil god's sculpture, while he was executing Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. While circulating the technique, he felt something enter his body along with the vital chi circulation. When the disciples of Great Mountain Sect arrived and executed Devil Withdraw command, even if it was unable to chase Duqian Devil King back, Qin Mu had felt the summoning being cut off when Devil Withdraw command shone on Duqian Devil King's body. The consciousness and magic power that had been surging out of his body had been cut off. This meant that there was still a portion of Duqian Devil King's consciousness and magic power in Qin Mu's body. In that case, the one in staying in my body and borrowing my eyes to observe the battle is none other than Duqian Devil King. Qin Mu was slightly terrified. Where exactly was this consciousness of Duqian Devil King hiding in his body? Why didn't he feel any abnormalities when he was cultivating Overlord Body 3 elixir technique all this while? What was Duqian Devil King planning? Granny C had Devil Cult Master Li Tianqing in her body, so if he got Duqian Devil King in his body, that would be a great joke. Qin Mu kept quiet. It was a good thing for him to let Duqian Devil King borrow his eyes to observe the battle. This allowed him to observe the situation in the battlefield, as well as the divine arts that the experts unleashed. This could widen his horizons exponentially. What's still in me is just a portion of Duqian Devil King's consciousness and magic power. No matter how strong he is, he cannot be that strong. As long as I can find him, I'll definitely be able to get rid of him. I shouldn't alert him but pretend I know nothing. He was finally able to see the battle clearly. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's swords weren't physical swords but ones formed by his vital chi, which was ever-changing, gathering and scattering at will. Flaming lights raged about his body as though he was a god, and Qin Mu remembered seeing this kind of rays on Village Chief's body too. When Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor executed sword skills, even the most basic sword form looked incomparably complicated and marvelous. There were not only basic sword forms in his sword skills but also calculations and transformations that were even more complicated. Dao Sword of Dao Sect? Qin Mu was stunned. He could see the shadow of Dao Sect's Dao Sword in Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's sword skill. That was an incomparably complicated calculation technique. If one took yin-yang symbol for example, anyone could draw a circle, but not everyone could calculate the proportion of the circle that the curved line cut apart. This involved the first form of Dao Sect, the trick to yin and yang come and go within two modes. To achieve the coming and going of yin and yang, using canon of supreme mystery was of utmost importance. Yin and yang come and go within two modes unleashed its greatest power when one calculated the endless numbers. If one wanted to reach an even higher level, they had to calculate to the Sukong and Qingjing decimal. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor has extremely deep attainments in mathematics. Qin Mu thought to himself. If I had known, I would have consulted him regarding the canon of supreme mystery when we were heading down south. The people clashing with Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor were the three elders, Teacher Poor, Wanderer Li, and True Lord Tian. They deserved to be called the top practitioners of the old generations. The rays given off from their bodies made them look like three ancient gods, and each of them had their own unique skills. The huge brush in Teacher Poor's hand was like a brush, yet its hairs were very long, making it look like a horsetail whisk. However, it had fewer transformations than a horsetail whisk. Wanderer Li was a sword cultivator and cultivated sword skills. They were incomparably intricate, but still inferior to those of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. His sword skills were made up of the 14 basic sword forms, so even though they were marvelous, they had already fallen behind in times. The age had advanced yet he still remained on the same spot. What True Lord Tian refined were venomous insects, turning them into all kinds of weird dragons. For example, there was a heavenly centipede dragon that was 300 yards long, a heaven silkworm that was refined into a dragon silkworm, a green snake that was refined into a green flood dragon, and many other kinds of insects of peculiar shapes. Even though these venomous creatures were powerful, they still fell out of the sky under Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's sword skills, getting killed one after another. Qin Mu reckoned that True Lord Tian wouldn't be able to hold out much longer. Other than these three people, there were still four others. Among them was Qi Dayo of Beggar Sect, whose 100-pore mystery technique was very unique. His body could materialize into physical form or incorporeal at will, allowing him to appear and disappear unpredictably. 100 Pour Mystery technique meant that he had nothing at all, and it was a very unique technique. The other person who had preserved his life so far was spiritual master Dao Quan. His ability was the weakest among everyone, so it was hard to say if he had managed to stay alive himself or Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had spared him, maybe no seeing him as a threat. The third person was Venerable Zhikong of Great Strength Monastery. The power of formation, existence, destruction, emptiness for incantations Madra was extraordinary, but under Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's sword, this senior monk that had achieved his Tao was covered in injuries and didn't have much strength left. The fourth person was the bronze-masked man. His attacks were the most overbearing, and also the most puzzling to Qin Mu. The man mainly used divine arts, and when they burst forth there would be images of 9 dragons. Those images looked like 9 real dragons rushing forward with formidable power. There was an incredible amount of transformations in these 9 dragons. They contained all kinds of offensive and defensive divine arts, as well as those that controlled fire and water, and those that evolved yin and yang. The firepower could be both fierce and also overbearing, yet it was also full of changes. No matter if it was offense, defense, or even refining, the bronze-masked man could do them at will. Furthermore, he had cultivated until these 9 dragons had close to a physical form. 9 Dragons Monarch Technique. This was the technique of the Emperor's Ling family. Only those with the Emperor's bloodline could cultivate it. Ordinary princes and princesses weren't allowed to touch it at all. It was evident that this bronze-masked man was a member of the royal family. Furthermore, from the realm of his cultivation, he should be one of the higher-ups of the higher-ups in the royal family. Even though his attack was incomparably overbearing, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor didn't kill him mercilessly. It was hard to say if he had some qualms about doing so. Who is this person? Qin Mu was shocked. Right at this moment, he felt something in his heart and looked towards the west to see a gigantic apparition of a majestic mountain hurrying over. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. This mountain was unbelievably big, but it was merely an apparition and not a physical mountain. It was formed by the aura of countless eccentric-looking monks. Mount Meru. That apparition of the mountain had many mountain tops of all sizes, and each mountain top was a monk sitting in the lotus position. There were also some who were standing and holding a jade vase, while a few others were sitting and holding their bellies with big smiles. On the golden top of the highest peak, there was a huge Buddha shining brilliantly as though he was made of pure gold. The 10,000 rays behind his head were incomparably outstanding. Great Thunderclap Monastery, Old Buddha Rulai. Qin Mu's heart trembled violently. Great Thunderclap Monastery had come. Rulai personally led the guardians, venerables, bodhisattvas, arhats of Great Thunderclap Monastery in a rush here. What did he want to do? At this moment, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor also felt something and suddenly attacked mercilessly, slaying Venerable Zhikong in one strike. Right then, the strong practitioners of Heavenly Devil Cult also turned around and looked at the apparition of Mount Meru that was floating over. Bald donkeys! Left Guardian sneered. Bald donkeys! Everyone shouted in unison. Monk Yun Ke saw everyone calling the newcomers bald donkeys, and forced himself to call them bald donkeys as well. After all, he was part of Heavenly Devil Cult now, even if he was a monk. The apparition of Mount Meru floated to the sky above them, and the guardians, venerables, bodhisattvas, and arhats on the mountain looked down together and said coldly in unison, "Evil creatures of the devil path." Qin Mu revealed a weird expression. The relation between our Heavenly Saint Cult and Great Thunderclap Monastery seems to be a little strained.